The yellowing, scorching summer noon sun poured down over the Academy of Performing Arts schoolyard like a giant furnace, thickening the air with the suffocating stench of asphalt and dust. Right in the middle of that sprawling courtyard, under the gaze of hundreds of curious eyes forming a suffocating circle around us, stood Lam Nhu. Her face was twisted with rage, her neatly manicured finger pointing straight at my face, her sharp, piercing voice deliberately ringing out for everyone to hear her filthy allegation: I had seduced her father. I stood opposite her, motionless as a statue carved from cold stone, quietly looking straight into those eyes burning with malicious fire. Lam Nhu, didn't your father tell you that he's actually just a private driver paid a monthly salary by my family? My silence wasn't cowardice, but ultimate contempt for the clumsy farce she was trying so hard to construct. My memory drifted back to the bustling morning of opening day not long ago. At that time, the indie film about poverty alleviation in a remote rural area where I played the female lead had just wrapped up after exhausting days of night shoots. To make it to school on time for registration, I hadn't even had time to take off my dusty makeup. I hastily rolled up the coarse cotton mattress I had been sleeping on in the crew's tent, clutched it tight, and hopped onto the crew's equipment pickup truck, speeding for several hours straight to the university gates. The moment I stepped into the dorm room, the smell of fresh paint mixed with the pungent perfume of city socialites hit my nose, making me slightly dizzy. Seeing an empty bed by the wall, I was about to set down my simple bedroll to unpack my luggage. But before the mattress could even touch the bed slats, a screeching, sharp voice pierced through from behind. Hey, that spot's taken. Before I could even turn around to process what was happening, a figure dashed past. Quick as lightning, Lam Nhu threw her expensive, sweet-scented bedding set down onto the empty bed with a heavy thud, as if marking her territory. She threw me a disgusted side-eye, then turned to another female student standing dazed nearby, commanding in a bossy tone. Uadiah, hurry up and make the bed. I don't want to sleep next to a country bumpkin. With that, she pinched her nose tight with 2 fingers, took a few steps back as if I were a walking disease vector, and threw in a deeply offensive remark. Smells awful. I looked down at myself in the yellowed mirror hanging on the closet door. Truth be told, my appearance at that moment was pitifully shabby. To suit my role as a poor girl overcoming hardship, I wore a cheap, rough, and suffocating polyester floral shirt. Below were crumpled black trousers, the hems still caked with dried mud from wading through fields on set. On my feet, my military green liberation shoes were frayed and torn, the soles worn down so thin they were almost holed through, letting me clearly feel the icy chill of the tiled floor. From top to bottom, I fitted the public stereotype of a destitute girl, fresh off the boat from a remote village, fleeing to the big city in search of a life-changing break. I shifted my gaze slightly to observe the girl standing there putting on airs, holding her nose and dismissing me as a redneck. Lam Nhu had porcelain skin, long slender legs, and a fairly lithe build. Her face, if evaluated fairly from a casting director's perspective, couldn't be considered exceptionally gorgeous or mind-blowing. Yet, for an acting student at a drama academy, her face possessed distinct, highly memorable angular features. It was a sharp, cold, slightly envious face, the exact kind of face where, in TV dramas, one didn't even need much acting skill to convincingly play an evil secondary female character who exists solely to frame the lead heroine. On any normal day, with my straightforward personality and the real power backing me behind the scenes, I wouldn't have hesitated to toss back a few sharp remarks to puncture her fragile pride. But today was the first day of school, the start of a new chapter in my life. I didn't want to bring unnecessary trouble upon myself the moment I crossed the campus threshold and disrupt my studies. With that thought suppressing the bubbling annoyance, I turned slightly and decisively tossed my coarse cotton mattress onto the empty bed across the room. Once we had finished clearing and making our beds, the suffocating tension in the room eased somewhat as the remaining roommates returned one by one. Setting aside my initial impressions, I politely smiled and greeted them to keep the peace. But those girls merely judged me coldly from head to toe with critical gazes, immediately treating me like thin air. They quickly turned their backs on me, buzzing excitedly around Lamb NHU like bees around honey, showering her with sugary flattery. In that dark, isolated corner, only one girl with a high, energetic ponytail stepped toward me. She offered a bright, warm, and genuine smile. "Hi there. My name is Lai Mong." That unexpected kindness made me feel much better. I smiled back, gently squeezing her hand. "Hi, I'm Tran Tin Phi." Upon hearing that name, Lai Mong's eyes lit up instantly like twin stars. She grabbed my hands, hopping up and down in excitement, unable to hide her admiration. "Wow, you're the Tran Tin Phi who ranked first in the acting major. I'm so thrilled. I can't believe I'm rooming with the top scorer." Just as Lai Mong excitedly pulled me down to sit on the edge of the bed to chat, loud, theatrical laughter erupted from the group surrounding Lamb NHU in the opposite corner, completely drowning out our quiet voices. "Wow, is this a Chanel 255? It's drop-dead gorgeous." The other roommates shrieked in unison, eyes wide and mouths agape, crowding around the handbag as if they'd just laid eyes on an invaluable treasure unearthed from a royal palace. Lamb NHU smiled triumphantly, the arrogance on her face deepening. She slowly stood up, draped the delicate dark gray quilted leather bag over her crook, and deliberately lifted her skirt hem, spinning around with ostentatious grace in front of everyone. "It's no big deal, really," Lamb NHU said in a nonchalant yet intensely proud tone. "It just came in, it was a bit over 60,000 yuan. Not that expensive, honestly." Hearing that number, I raised an eyebrow slightly, looking closely at the handbag she was cradling like an heirloom. However, my casual observation caught Lamb NHU's eye. Her mouth immediately twitched into a sneer, her eyes flashing with sharp mockery. "Tran Tin Phi, right. So what if you ranked first in the major? In the end, aren't you still just a country bumpkin who's never seen fine things in her life? Staring at my bag with such greedy eyes, like you want to swallow the leather whole." Seeing her smug demeanor, I nearly burst out laughing on the spot. By what authority did she claim I'd never seen good things? My family owned an entire sprawling villa located on prime real estate dedicated solely to one purpose, housing my mother's and my designer handbag collections. Even the ultra-rare Hermes Himalaya limited to just 13 pieces worldwide and the holy grail for every megastar my house owned two of, one for me, one for my mother. The reason I was staring at that Chanel 255 had absolutely nothing to do with greed or jealousy, as her narrow mind assumed. I was looking at it because I had just realized that bag looked identical to an old bag currently sitting tossed in a dusty corner of my closet back home. Not only were they identical in style, color, and signature quilted stitching, but long ago, back when I was still in high school, I was gifted an exact Chanel 255 the moment it landed in the country. But before the joy of owning a new bag could last, my mischievous, unruly younger cousin ruined it. That little brat, by some miracle, had taken a small carving knife and secretly carved a pile of poop onto the intricate metal turnlock. Worse yet, the kid was a born artistic genius. On a piece of metal no bigger than a thumb tip, he managed to carve a pile of poop so vivid and realistic, complete with three-dimensional textures, that it looked horrifyingly real. Ever since seeing that monstrous piece of art on an expensive bag, I had never worn it again, feeling thoroughly grossed out and unsettled. I casually tossed it deep into my wardrobe, leaving it to gather dust year after year. Naturally, in my family's storage villa, countless bags worth tens, hundreds, or millions of yuan suffered the same forgotten fate. The only reason I remembered this particular bag out of thousands of designer pieces was solely because of the deep memory of that painfully realistic carved poop. Looking closely at the lock on the bag hanging from Lam Nhu Nhu's arm, a strange light flickered in my eyes. I took a step closer. Pointing at the bag in her hands, I asked honestly, "Why is there a pile of poop carved on your bag?" My question dropped into the quiet dorm room like a 1,000-pound boulder thrown into a calm lake, sending instant shockwaves rippling out. The old ceiling fan whirred overhead, pushing dry gusts of air that only heightened the stifling, breathless tension. Poop. Lam Nhu Nhu's eyes, previously sparkling with smug vanity, went wide, her nostrils flaring, her pretty face freezing instantly like a wax figure. She stood stock still, her breathing coming in short gasps, the designer bag tucked under her arm like a priceless treasure suddenly becoming an extremely touchy subject. Before Lam Nhu could open her mouth to defend herself, Hua Ji, who always hovered beside her like a loyal hunting dog, instantly jumped up. Glaring with wide eyes, she pointed a bright red, ostentatiously manicured finger straight at me, screeching in a biting, deeply contemptuous voice. Nhu just bought a brand new bag, how could there be poop on it? What a country bumpkin, you must spend so much time sitting in outhouses that your head's full of filthy thoughts. Looking at Hua Ji's fiercely protective, ready-to-pounce stance, I couldn't help but sigh inwardly. Oh, I get it now. Hua Ji was Lam Nhu's little lapdog. School had barely started and she was already rushing to submit, flattery flying left and right just to catch a bit of reflected glory from this fake heiress. To be university students entering a prestigious academy. Yet still playing high school clique games was truly laughable in its childish pettiness. But looking back, Lam Nhu did seem to have a knack for winning people over with just a few cheap gifts or lavish promises. She trained a loyal dog ready to bite on command. Just as Hua Ji was smugly berating me to curry favor with her master, Lai Mong, sitting beside me, stood up unhurriedly. Unlike Lam Nhu's drained face or Hua Ji's aggression, Lai Mong maintained an exceedingly calm demeanor, her eyes sharp and full of scrutiny. She casually stepped forward, taking the bag to inspect it under the faint fluorescent light of the dorm. With just one careful glance, her brows knit tight, the corners of her lips curling into disgust. There really is a pile of poop carved on this. The moment those decisive words left Lai Mong's mouth, the atmosphere flipped instantly. Curiosity mixed with intense suspicion erupted among the other roommates. Everyone's eyes were pulled like a magnet straight to her slender finger pointing at the gold-plated lock. Heads huddled close, breaths held, everyone straining to see clearly. A second later, the dorm practically exploded with murmurs, whispers, and sarcastic giggles. On that delicate gold-plated lock, a symbol of luxury, was indeed a lifelike carving of a pile of poop, every sharp curve crafted so realistically it gave people goosebumps. The presence of this bizarre detail completely ruined the sleek elegance of the pricey designer bag. Lam Nhu, didn't you say you just bought this new from the boutique for over 60,000 yuan? Someone in the crowd blurted out the question in a deeply mocking, sarcastic tone. The question hit Lam Nhu like a bucket of ice water dumped over her crumbling self-esteem. As she stood frozen in place, her face pale as a ghost, Lai Mong added icily, landing a fatal blow to her lies. I think someone takes us for fools. If you don't have money, why try so hard to pretend to be a rich socialite? Lai Mong's words were as sharp as a scalpel, stripping away the glamorous mask Lam Nhu had spent so much effort painting in front of everyone. Lam Nhu's face flushed red like a ripe tomato, bitter humiliation visible in her trembling, bloodshot, furious eyes. Mortified and panicked, she snatched the bag back from Lai Mong's hands, hugging it tightly against her chest as if terrified someone would seize the incriminating evidence or perhaps trying to use her body to hide the embarrassing truth exposed to the world. Stuttering, she strained her voice to save face, her tone quivering with fear. The store clerk must have grabbed the wrong one. Just wait, I'm definitely filing a complaint against her. Seeing her flustered, panicky stance, everyone secretly laughed. How could such a flimsy, forced excuse fool sharp college minds? Suspicion spread like an oil slick on water. Everyone began to deeply doubt her high-class socialite background. If she were truly a wealthy heiress from an elite family, how could she carelessly purchase a flawed bag with such a weird carving without noticing? It could only be a cheap knockoff or involve some shady backstory. The room's attitude chilled perceptibly. The earlier eagerness to flatter vanished completely, replaced by cold, judging glares. Silent, everyone returned to making their own beds, the rustling of sheets making the space feel awkward and suffocating. Standing in a corner, I watched the ridiculous comedy play out from start to finish, shaking my head in quiet dismay. I felt like lamb NHU, and I really had an inexplicable bad streak of luck together. Out of all the designer bags in the world, for a Chanel bag to have a carved pile of poop on it was a mind-boggling coincidence. My bag, carved by my delinquent cousin and tossed into a dusty closet, had now reappeared as an exact replica in lamb NHU's hands. I wondered where she had bought it, or if she had accidentally picked up the old item I hadn't bothered to look at in years. Yet back then, I didn't know an even more dramatic twist was waiting for me ahead, a truth that would expose her real face far more thoroughly and brutally. At that moment, I looked down at my own shabby appearance. I had rushed back to school after the break, still wearing the clothes I'd worn while shooting in a remote village, a baggy, coarse t-shirt caked with faint dust paired with oversized floor-sweeping pants. Even the slippers on my feet were classic 80s-style blue sparkling plastic sandals. Hilariously outdated, to say nothing of carrying designer bags or wearing gold jewelry to prove my status. Right now, I looked no different from a poor rural girl setting foot in the big city for the first time, lost among stylishly dressed roommates. To prepare for the upcoming school days, I pulled out my phone to call my mother, asking her to pack some casual clothes from home and have our private driver bring them to school. Knowing my mother's flair for luxury and ostentation, I emphasized every word over the phone carefully. "Mom, please don't send anything with loud designer logos. Just pack a few custom-tailored, minimalist pieces from home. They're comfortable, low-key, and won't draw unwanted attention at school." The reason I had to be so careful was that ever since I was little, my father had ingrained a vital rule in me: keep your wealth hidden. The richer you are, the more you must lay low. I remembered vividly his stern yet protective face every time he held me in our sprawling villa, stroking my hair and telling me in a quiet, hoarse voice, "My darling, do you know Lai Ka-shing? His son was kidnapped in broad daylight, and the criminals demanded a ransom of 1 billion yuan to release him. 1 billion yuan to our family is like a brief drizzle, it barely hurts. But I'm terrified of encountering ruthless kidnappers who don't keep their word, taking the money and killing the hostage anyway to destroy the evidence. Money lost can be remade, but my only precious daughter exists once in this world." At that point, the powerful, formidable businessman's eyes would redden, warm tears rolling down his stern face. His ultimate concern for me surpassed all superficial material wealth. In reality, this was the normal mindset of truly wealthy people in daily life. They don't need designer labels to prove their status. On the contrary, they keep as low a profile as possible to protect themselves and their families from lurking dangers. Regrettably, my mother was a clear exception. The words low profile simply didn't exist in her dictionary. To her, life was meant to be enjoyed and adorned with the finest luxury goods. When the private driver called to say he had arrived at the school gates, I strolled out in my shabby plastic sandals. But the moment the trunk of the luxury supercar popped open, I gasped, my eyes wide in absolute shock. Good grief, sitting before me was a mobile treasure vault. Inside the vast trunk were piles of limited edition paper bags and gift boxes from the latest autumn collections of top global fashion houses. From level to hermate, everything was there, stacked high, wafting the rich scent of brand new fine leather and high-end perfume. Looking through the clear glass into the back seat, I saw a row of mint-condition shoes, from crystal-embellished heels to limited-edition sneakers. Packed so tightly there wasn't a single gap left. Panicking, I quickly pulled out my phone to call my mother. "Mom, didn't I explicitly tell you to just send a few simple custom pieces from home? Why did you buy so many high-end luxury items? How am I supposed to carry all this back to my dorm?" The line went quiet for a few seconds before my mother seemed to remember something crucial, her voice bashful yet elegant. "Oh dear, I completely forgot my little girl is experiencing dorm life. I thought you were staying in the villa we bought right next to campus." Hearing my mother's profoundly forgetful yet ridiculously wealthy response, I was rendered speechless. Knowing her nature, I waited silently for the second half. Sure enough, she immediately offered a sweet, placating laugh. "Honestly, I just couldn't stop my hands from shopping whenever I saw cute things that suit you. Fi, this time I got you a limited edition autumn sweatshirt from Level. I swear it's the only item without a loud brand logo that I found absolutely gorgeous. Try it on and send me a picture, okay?" The moment she hung up, my phone buzzed with an image of the sweatshirt sent via text. It was a cream-white sweatshirt adorned with exquisite vintage patterns embroidered in shimmering gold and silver thread. The craftsmanship was immaculate down to the smallest detail, and indeed, there wasn't a single visible brand logo anywhere. The elegant, refined design instantly won me over through the screen. Hanging up, I sighed and bent down to dig through the luxury car's trunk, pushing aside hermit bags and limited edition shoes. But after searching every nook and cranny, that intricately embroidered sweatshirt was nowhere to be found. Just as I was breaking a sweat searching through the pile of high-end items, my phone rang frantically, breaking my focus. The screen displayed a call from my department's academic advisor. The moment I picked up, her voice sounded stern and urgent, telling me to come to her office immediately because of an urgent matter. The rush in her voice stirred a vague sense of unease in my chest. There was no time left. The advisor's phone call rang long and urgent once more, shattering the quiet inside the car. I glanced down at the screen, letting out a tired sigh. The inside of the luxury vehicle suddenly felt cramped and suffocating. The faint scent of fine leather and subtle perfume could no longer calm the growing restlessness in my heart. Looking at the mountain of cluttered belongings and ribbon-tied gift boxes, I selected only a few items with subtle, non-flashy logos to take back to the dorm. By nature, I disliked drawing attention, let alone becoming the center of gossip on campus. I instructed the driver to take the rest back home, my voice flat yet decisive through the windshield glass. As for that sweatshirt, I truly loved it, those fine hand-embroidered details lingering in my mind in this high-pressure moment. Finding it over the weekend would do. Comforting myself with that thought, I quickly stepped out of the car, my hurried footsteps breaking toward the faculty office building. After settling things with the academic advisor, the tedious paperwork and hour-long lecture finally drew to a close. Exhausted, I dragged my feet back to the student dormitories. Yet, as I reached the door of room 502, the noise inside sounded like a chaotic marketplace. High-pitched chatter and endless praise echoed straight through the thin wooden door into my ears. "Oh wow, NHU, this is a limited edition piece from Level. I'm dying of envy. The moment it dropped yesterday, I dreamed of owning one." That idolizing voice belonged to none other than my roommates crowding around a central figure. Immediately after, a familiar voice loaded with supreme arrogance and a fake, condescending air cut in. "Oh, it was only a few tens of thousands of yuan. My dad just dropped it off for me. Next time, I'll invite you all to ride in my family's car. It's a limited edition, too." "Really, NHU, you're the absolute best." Standing outside the door, I let out a subtle, cold smirk. I didn't recognize all the voices, but this dramatic tag-team flattery definitely had Hua Daya's stamp on it. Her voice was high, sharp, and shrill like a needle piercing the eardrum, making anyone listening deeply uncomfortable. With a voice like that, her future acting career wouldn't amount to much at best. She'd play a few palace servant roles. kneeling and kissing up to masters in cheap historical family dramas. I pushed the door open, the dry creak of the wooden door cutting through the boiling atmosphere of flattery inside. The moment she saw me step over the threshold, Lam Nhu drew out her voice, launching into her familiar dramatic performance. She sprang up in the middle of the room, deliberately contorting her body to show off the top she was wearing before chiming in with a provocative sneer. My goodness, even without a logo on this top, you guys still recognized it. As expected, we're the ones in the same class. She lightly stroked the fabric, her red manicured fingers gliding over the soft material, throwing me a side glance before faking a heavy sigh. Such a shame, a high-quality room like 502, yet a country bumpkin crawled in and dragged down the class of the whole room. Initially, I didn't intend to pay her any mind. Unpacking my things and getting some rest were my main priorities. I walked past her as if she were thin air. Yet my indifference seemed to offend Lam Nhu's shallow pride. Unexpectedly, she stepped out, her long legs brazenly blocking my path, her face twisted in annoyance at not getting the reaction she wanted. She raised her chin, declaring loudly, "Tran Tin Phi, I advise you to know your place. A country bumpkin like you simply doesn't deserve to share a dorm room with us." I raised my head blankly, showing no anger or fluster whatsoever. Slowly, I let my eyes scan the room from the ceiling down to the floor, stopping at the empty space before me as if searching for something bizarre. Clicking my tongue, I put on an innocent yet mocking tone. Who brought a dog into the dorm? Why do I keep hearing barking?" With that, I stepped forward, stomping straight onto her foot that was intentionally blocking my way without a moment's hesitation. Lam Nhu was wearing thin flip-flops, leaving her instep completely exposed, while I wore the plastic sandals I used on movie sets. They had hard, stone-like grid soles with extremely high traction and durability designed to prevent slipping on set. With my full body weight slamming down through that step, Lam Nhu instantly grimaced in agony, her heavily powdered face contorting wildly. Hopping on one foot, she opened her mouth and screeched, "Tran Tin Phi, are you blind? Can't you see my foot?" I was just about to lash back and teach her a proper lesson in manners. But before I could speak, Lai Mong couldn't hold back any longer. From the corner of the room, Lai Mong stood up abruptly, pointing straight at Lam Nhu's face and firing off a tirade. "Lam Nhu, clearly your foot was begging for a beating. Phi wasn't even bothering with you, and you deliberately stuck your leg out to block her. Are you a reincarnated nuisance? Do you get uncomfortable if you aren't getting yelled at?" Lam Nhu's eyes turned red with rage, her chest heaving heavily from humiliation and pain. Unable to contain her surging frenzy, she lunged forward, aiming her sharp fingernails at Lai Mong. Seeing her aggressive move, I pivoted instantly, moving like lightning to shield Lai Mong and catching her wrist in a tight grip. I held a black belt in Taekwondo, though I didn't look overly muscular or broad on the outside, appearing slender and delicate. My explosive strength was no joke. With her wrist locked in my steel grip, Lam Nhu couldn't budge an inch, her face flushing crimson as she struggled in vain. In her sheer powerlessness and fury, she used her free hand to clutch the sweatshirt she was wearing, gritting her teeth to threaten me in a trembling, shrill voice. "Tran Tin Phi, I'm warning you. If you ruin this top, you won't be able to afford it even if you work your whole life." I almost burst out laughing at her childish, absurd threat. What kind of clothes could I not afford in a lifetime? My Tran family's background could easily buy out the entire brand, let alone a single sweatshirt. Carrying that contempt, I followed her hand, cradling the hem of the top, and then my pupils suddenly contracted. I froze mid-motion. What a coincidence. We're wearing the exact same thing. The top Lam Nhu was wearing was the limited edition level sweatshirt my mother had just bought for me, an exclusive cut made of finely woven wool cashmere blend. With delicate floral embroidery running down the sleeves, Most importantly, it featured a logo-free design, the exact piece I loved and had seen in the photo my mother sent less than 2 hours ago. Scared now, are you? Seeing me suddenly fall silent, Lamb NHU assumed I was intimidated by the price of the top. She sneered triumphantly, her tone growing even more arrogant. If you don't want your whole family drowning in debt so you can't afford college, let go of me right now. What did she say after that? It didn't enter my ears at all. All her insults and threats sounded like meaningless buzzing flies to me. My mind was spinning with a single repeating question and 1,000 doubts. There's no way. It can't be this coincidental. I released her wrist decisively, causing her to stumble back a few paces. Ignoring her smug expression, I walked quietly over to my desk, trying to process everything logically. For Lamb NHU to have the same bag as me wasn't too strange. No matter how expensive luxury goods are, people with money can buy them. The weird part was that both bags had a pile of poop carved into the lock, a custom hand-carved detail made specifically at my request. A unique mark that wouldn't exist anywhere else in the world. Her purchasing a level top wasn't remarkable on its own either. But why was it that right when my mother had the driver bring the top over, her father happened to deliver an identical one to her? This overlap in time and space went far beyond normal randomness. Most importantly, I had searched the car inside and out, from the back seat to the trunk, and still couldn't find my sweatshirt anywhere. The top my family's driver brought over had vanished mysteriously right before I checked the load. Strung together, these strange events formed a picture full of questions and shade. Looks like I definitely had to head home this weekend to find that Chanel bag with the poop carving. I wanted to see if this situation was truly as dramatic as my suspicions suggested. Over the weekend, when the car came to a stop in front of the familiar courtyard, I stepped out carrying a mind heavy with thoughts. Pushing open the thick oak doors of the villa, the familiar warm, lavish ambience wrapped around me. Cheerful voices erupted instantly as my parents, already standing in the main hall, greeted me with radiant, joyful expressions, as if welcoming an honored guest from afar. Truth be told, it had been a long time since we'd gathered together like this. For months on end, I had been wrapped up on movie sets, sleeping rough. My carefully maintained skin had even darkened slightly under the sun and wind of the location shoots. Returning today, I wore simple, comfortable casual clothes for ease of movement. The moment she saw my appearance, the joyful smile on my mother's lips faltered slightly, replaced by a look of intense pity and a subtly hurt expression on her face, which now bore a few light lines of age. She stepped forward quickly, her soft, expensive creamed hands tightly gripping mine, rubbing them while gently scolding me with a tearful tone. "My darling, why are you dressed so plainly? I spent so much effort buying you so many new clothes, the latest designs of the season. Why aren't you wearing any of them? And where is that level sweatshirt? I remembered it didn't have any loud embroidered logos on it. Or are you older now? Famous now and no longer like the humble pieces your own mother picked out for you?" At those words, her eyes reddened, carrying a hint of genuine hurt. As people say, as parents grow older, they become emotionally sensitive, constantly harboring a vague fear that once their children grow wings, they will drift away and resent them. Even if my family possessed immense wealth and lived in luxury, my parents' hearts toward their only child were just as vulnerable as those of any ordinary family out there. Seeing the disappointment and anxiety in my mother's eyes, my heart ached with guilt. I immediately launched into a sweet charm offensive, combining gentle comfort with endless compliments to soothe her sensitive soul. "Oh, Mom dear, what are you saying? Your fashion taste is the absolute best in the world. How could I ever dislike it? The moment I saw the picture of that level sweatshirt you texted me, I fell in love with it instantly. But I had so much luggage in the dorm, plus the advisor called me up to the office urgently for paperwork, so in all the rush, I didn't have time to dig through the bags to find it. I told the driver to bring all those clothes back home that day. Don't worry, Mom. I'll go up to my room later, find that sweatshirt, try it on, and take pictures or put on a private fashion show just for you. Hearing my honeyed words, the heavy weight on my mother's heart dissolved completely. Her face relaxed, breaking into a bright spring smile. She took my hand and led me along, her voice cheerful. "I had the driver bring all those clothes up to your dressing room the other day. Come on, let's go upstairs and find it together to see how pretty my darling looks in it." However, reality served us a cold dose of truth. Stepping into the massive dressing room resembling a mini boutique with bright LED lights illuminating hundreds of glass cabinets filled with high-end apparel and handbags, my mother and I spent half the day turning every corner upside down. We dug through piles of brand new clothes with tags still attached and checked every hanger, moving from one wardrobe to the next until sweat beaded on our foreheads. But the level sweatshirt remained completely MIA. Standing amid the messy room, hands on her hips, my mother murmured with a baffled expression, "How can this be? That's so odd." She knit her brows, trying hard to remember, and continued, "The other clothes were loaded onto the car by the driver. But that specific level sweatshirt was hand-picked by me, and I personally placed it in a bag. I even deliberately picked a very low-key bag to put it in." I stopped searching and turned around, asking curiously, "Wait, does our house even have a bag that counts as low-key? I thought we only had paper bags from famous designer brands." My mother gave me an affectionate side-eye. Before buying clothes for me, she had stopped by to view a new villa for investment. The real estate brokerage had handed out large canvas tote bags to clients for transaction documents. She saw the bag was plain with no luxury brand logos on the outside, so she placed the sweatshirt inside it. She had secretly thought that when her daughter opened such a plain-looking bag and unexpectedly found a gorgeous, limited-edition designer top inside, she would be even more surprised and touched by her thoughtful mother. That level sweatshirt wasn't crazy expensive or beyond our means, but it was a surprise gift my mother had carefully prepared, packed with sweet maternal care. For it to vanish inexplicably made her feel disappointed, sad, and a bit angry. Seeing my mother upset, my heart ached for her. I quickly put an arm around her shoulders to comfort her, saying I'd check the car thoroughly later in case the driver hadn't brought everything inside yet. But first, I needed to prioritize finding the Chanel bag with the carved poop lock. The moment I asked about that bag, my mother seemed to remember something and clapped her hands together with a sharp snap. "Ah, if you asked about your other designer bags, I wouldn't remember a thing among this forest of items. But I have an extremely deep impression of that Chanel bag with the poop on it. When you brought it home, weren't you so angry your face turned red, tossing it into the corner and saying anyone could have it because you'd never touch it again?" I saw the poop design on the lock looked both hilarious and weird. Gifting it to my friends in high society felt way too embarrassing, like I wouldn't know where to hide my face. So a few days ago, when driver Ma saw it lying in the corner of the storage room and said he didn't mind the eccentric style, I casually gave it to him. I froze in my tracks, my mind struck by a bolt of lightning out of the blue. My family employed a few private drivers for our transportation needs, and driver Ma was the exact person assigned to drive the clothes and bag to school for me the other day. But there was an extremely glaring contradiction and absurdity here. This driver's surname was Ma, while that obnoxious girl at my school, Lamb NHU, carried the surname Lamb. Could it be? Things weren't as I had guessed and suspected all along. What was the actual truth behind these strange coincidences? My mind swirling with questions and wild theories, I told myself to stay calm to uncover the truth. I decided to wait patiently until Sunday afternoon when the weekend break ended and driver Ma would be responsible for driving me back to school. On that trip, I was going to get to the bottom of everything. Sunday afternoon passed quickly under the overcast sky of late autumn. I stepped out to the car, preparing for the ride back to campus. Sitting in the familiar back seat, I looked through the rearview mirror, observing driver Ma's quiet back as he started the engine. The luxury car glided smoothly out of the villa gates, merging into the bustling traffic on the main road. The interior was so quiet you could hear the steady hum of the engine and the faint hiss of the wind pressing against the window glass. Not wanting to beat around the bush, I decided to go straight to the point with a preemptive strike. Clearing my throat, I kept my tone calm yet commanding. Driver Ma, on the car the other day, I remember there was a large tote bag from the Big Bay Estate Real Estate Company containing a level sweatshirt. My mother carefully placed it in the back seat before you set off, when you brought my things up to my room. Did you not bring that tote along with the rest of the clothes? The moment I finished asking, my eyes locked onto the rearview mirror to catch every tiny reaction on Driver Ma's face. Just as I expected, a flash of utter panic flickered in the usually calm eyes of the veteran driver. His pupils contracted, his lips pressed into a tight line, and the veins on his neck twitched slightly. For a long time, he remained completely silent, refusing to answer my question. That drawn-out silence was an unspoken confession, rendering the atmosphere inside the cabin suffocatingly tense. To turn up the psychological pressure, I added slowly, word by word, that sweatshirt was actually a surprise gift my mother spent a lot of effort preparing specifically for me. But now it's nowhere to be found, whether at home or in the car. I wonder who might have accidentally or intentionally taken it and put it somewhere else. At this, Driver Ma visibly shook. He swallowed hard, his shoulders trembling slightly. After much hesitation, he mustered up the courage, asking in a trembling, deeply uneasy voice, "Young lady, how much was that top in the bag actually worth?" It couldn't have been that expensive, right? Seeing his terrified face, I said nothing. Instead, I calmly unlocked my phone, navigated to Level's official website, and held the screen up directly in front of his face. On the bright display, the image of the black sweatshirt and its listed retail price were crystal clear, 98,000 yuan. When the number 98,000 yuan hit his eyes, I felt a visible chill run down the driver's spine. His hands on the premium leather-wrapped steering wheel tightened so hard his knuckles turned white. His entire complexion turned gray as ash in an instant, cold sweat breaking out on his forehead and trickling down his cheeks. His voice trembled violently, completely cracking with regret and fear. "Young lady, I'm so sorry, truly sorry. I thought that top wasn't worth much, so I gave it away to someone else." I sat there utterly stunned, my ears ringing at his straightforward yet absurd confession. "Huh?" I blurted out, unable to hide the shock and rising anger in my chest. "Driver Ma, how could you do that? How could you take private belongings belonging to your employer's family and give them to an outsider without even asking first?" Driver Ma turned his head back, his face contorted in deep misery and pleading, his eyes red. "Young lady, I know I was wrong. I really didn't know it was that expensive. Can I go get that top back for you right now? Maybe they just received it and haven't had a chance to wear it yet." My eyes locked onto him coldly. Refusing to give him room to dodge, I pressed sharply, my voice razor-thin. "Who did you give that expensive top to?" Driver Ma stammered for a long time, his mouth opening and closing, his face flushed crimson with embarrassment and distress. Finally, he squeaked out a few words through his teeth. "Young lady, I gave it to my daughter." "Daughter?" I froze, my mind instantly spinning in a tangled web. Driver Ma had worked for my family for many years, ever since I was a child. In all those years, everyone in our household knew he was single, had never been married, and had never mentioned having any children. Where did a daughter suddenly come from? That question dug deep into my mind like a dagger, leaving a heavy, suspicious silence inside the narrow, suffocating space of the car. A series of massive question marks popped up in my head, connecting all the bizarre events of the past few days. A cold light flashed in my mind, and instantly Lam Nhun, whose arrogant, sneering face and contemptuous eyes appeared crystal clear in my thoughts. Yet, shifting my eyes to look at the profile of the distressed man behind the wheel, I failed to find a single thread of resemblance between the two. Driver Ma was a rugged, weathered man with dark skin, deep crow's feet, and an honest demeanor. How could he possibly be the father of someone as arrogant, snobbish, and scheming as Lam Nhun? While I was lost in a chaotic swirl of theories, Driver Ma panicked completely. His rough hands, accustomed to holding the steering wheel, now fumbled nervously as he opened WeChat on his brightly lit phone screen. His anxious, heavy breaths broke the silence. "Young lady, I'm messaging my daughter right now. I'll tell her absolutely not to wear that top. Don't worry, once I drop you off at the school gates, I'll head straight over to her place to get it back." With that, driver Ma nervously tapped out message after message on his phone screen with his thumb, sweat beading on his forehead despite the car's air conditioning blowing cold air. I didn't mean to pry. But the close distance allowed me to catch the contact name and profile picture on the active WeChat chat screen with a quick glance. The avatar, a posh side profile photo enhanced with a shimmering color filter, and the fancy account name belonged to none other than Lam NHU. My chest tightened, a wave of profound irony washing over me. When I returned to the dorm, the suffocating atmosphere of the long hallway greeted me with hurried footsteps. As luck would have it, I caught Lam NHU clutching that expensive sweatshirt tightly, rushing down the stairs. Her face was fraught with anxiety, her steps hasty as if fleeing from something. But not long after, about 15 minutes later, she trudged back into the room empty-handed. Her usually heavily painted face was now gray, gloomy, and utterly defeated, looking as miserable as if she'd just been stripped of the massive fortune she took so much pride in. Lai Mong was sitting casually on the edge of her iron bed, holding a ceramic mug of warm water. Watching Lam NHU's dejected figure, she let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "Oh my, Miss Lam's designer sweatshirt sure came fast and left even faster. Barely had time to warm up before it flew away." Finishing her sentence, Lai Mong ignored Lam NHU's face turning from pale gray to sickly green. She set her mug down, stood up, and walked over to sit beside me on the edge of the wooden bed. Wrapping her arm around mine, she deliberately raised her voice so it echoed clearly across the small dorm room. Fi, did you hear the news? Just now, as I passed the hallway corner, I overheard a middle-aged man calling Lam NHU on the phone. His tone was super harsh, strictly demanding she return that top immediately. Goodness, I'm starting to suspect that designer top was actually crowdfunded by a group of people who take turns borrowing it to put on a show. Lai Mong was a straightforward person who had long been disgusted by Lam NHU's condescending, arrogant demeanor. Given the right chance, she wouldn't hesitate to land a few fatal blows to strip away that fake facade. Hearing those mocking jabs, Lam NHU looked like she'd been stepped on. Her eyes bulged, bloodshot veins showing in her whites, and she pointed her bright red fingernails straight at Lai Mong's face. Screaming in rage, "What the hell do you know, slanderous bitch? Given my family's status, why would I ever share clothes? My closet is overflowing with clothes. I got tired of wearing it, so can I switch to something else? You broke loser, looking at everyone like they're as poor as you." Lai Mong maintained her relaxed composure. She calmly took a small sip from her mug, swallowed slowly, and smirked. "I certainly don't know as much as you, Miss Lam. All I know is you've worn that same designer sweatshirt continuously for almost a week, to class, to dinner, even to sleep, and I haven't seen you take it off once to wash it." "Oh right. I remembered too, and that designer bag, you're always carrying that exact same single one." Another roommate, usually very quiet, couldn't help but chime in softly, her eyes on Lam NHU filled with doubt and sarcasm. A truly wealthy person from a prominent family would never dress and use accessories in such a repetitive, broke way. Yeah, exactly. I've noticed it for a long time too, another girl added, clicking her tongue. Her voice was quiet, but it fell like cold water on Lam NHU's fragile pride. Whenever she goes out, she only uses that black Chanel bag, never seen her switch once. On the flip side, I actually feel like Fi's clothes, though simple, have amazing fabric quality and exquisite stitching. They look a lot like high-end custom-tailored pieces made for high society. This comparison was the final straw, driving Lam NHU's fury past the point of no return. In her warped, twisted worldview, she was a precious flower, noble and magnificent. How dare these ordinary nobodies in a dorm room compare her to a poor country bumpkin like me, dragging her down in the process. Exploding with rage, her last shred of reason burned away. Sure enough, she spun around, stomping over to stand right in front of me, pointing her trembling finger at the tip of my nose as she spewed shrill, nasty insults. A filthy country bumpkin like Tran Tin Phi is worthy of being compared to me. Are you people blind? Look at her entire outfit. She's so dirt poor she doesn't even have a decent set of clothes. Even the soles of those green liberation shoes are worn down to holes, yet she treasures them, keeping them locked in a small box under her bed like we'd actually bother stealing her smelly, ruined shoes, and you open your mouths to claim her stuff is higher quality than mine. You're all blind and deaf. Sitting on the bed, hearing the words liberation shoes and small box, my entire body froze like a stone statue. A cold chill ran from my spine straight to the top of my head. Wait, how did Lamb NHU know I kept those old liberation shoes in a small box under my bed? That was my most private space, tucked deep into a narrow, hidden corner. Could it be? Had she rummaged through my personal belongings while no one was in the room? Alarm bells blared in my head, my heart pounding rapidly. I crouched down immediately, reaching out to pull the small cardboard box from under the bed. The lid was crooked, dust motes floating in the faint sunlight slanting through the door crack. Opening the lid fully, my chest tightened with fury. Sure enough, those faded green liberation shoes, the single, sacred keepsake I treasured, were completely gone without a trace. In their place, sitting proudly inside the battered box, was a pair of tacky pink plastic flip-flops belonging to Lamb NHU. Yes, the exact pair she had worn the day she tried to trip me, only for me to crush her in step with my heavy plastic sandal. Seeing me crouching on the floor, hands trembling around the empty box, Lamb NHU looked immensely smug. She had no idea she had just crossed my ultimate red line, unaware that a terrifying disaster was about to fall upon her head. Instead, she took a few steps forward, puffing out her chest, crossing her arms, and wearing a patronizing smile. Tran Tin Phi. Seeing how poor and desperate you are, I felt a spark of pity as your roommate. So out of the goodness of my heart, I opened that filthy box and threw those rotten shoes into the trash to clear up room. You should be thanking me, look. I even gave you my own flip-flops. Don't look down on them just because they're used. They're worth a few thousand yuan. A poor loser like you couldn't dream of touching them in a lifetime. To be honest, the moment I saw those dirty flip-flops in my box and heard the shameless insults spewing from her heavily powdered face, my blood boiled to 100 degrees. My hands clenched into fists, my whole body trembling with rage. I wanted nothing more than to lunge forward and land a thunderous slap across her brazen face to shut her up for good. In the end, logic pulled me back from the brink of impulse. In this digital age, everyone carried a smartphone ready to film, snap photos, and upload them to social media at a moment's notice. If a malicious person edited a clip out of context, flipping black and white to fabricate a school bullying story, the fallout would be catastrophic. It wouldn't just ruin my personal reputation. Worse, it could directly affect the unreleased blockbuster movie I had poured so much heart into. Dealing with a petty, scheming person like Lamb NHU meant punches and violence were never the smartest weapons. I took a deep breath to steady my racing heart, slowly standing up. A cold, intimidating aura emanated from me, making Lai Mong and the others hold their breath. I gripped my phone so hard my knuckles turned pale, locking my sharp eyes onto her smug face. I spoke, my voice ringing out firm and unwavering. Lamb NHU, did you take advantage of my absence to dig through my things and open my personal box? Yeah, I opened it. So what? Lamb NHU didn't flinch at all. She raised her chin, openly admitting to invading my privacy in front of everyone, crossing her arms defensively. Look at her, guys. I nicely threw out her trash and left her designer gear, yet she looks at me like I stole her life savings. Talk about ungrateful complaining that my flip-flops are used. Ignoring her defensive babbling, my gaze darkened further as I took a step forward, cornering her with another question in a low, dangerous tone. You personally threw away my liberation shoes from that box, didn't you? Do you have any idea how important those shoes were to me? Tell me right now, where did you throw them? My voice turned rigid, slicing through the stifling, razor-thin tension of the dorm room like a sharp blade. My chest heaved with rapid breaths, my hands gripping the phone so tightly that my knuckles turned stark white, trembling with a wave of rage surging from the depths of my heart. Hearing me stress how important those shoes were, Lam Nhu's eyes contracted, and in a split second, a sinister, despicable glint flashed beneath her heavily styled eyelashes. She looked like a predator who had just discovered her prey's fatal weakness. Uncontrollable triumph crept up the corners of her lips, twisting into a distorted smile. She threw me a condescending glance, raising her chin in defiance. If those raggedy shoes were so important to you, I'll be merciful and generous enough to let you know where I tossed them. But Tran Tin Phi, don't go dreaming that they're sitting nicely in the clean trash bin down the hall. I don't have time to smell that broke stench. I had someone take them straight to the school trash facility. I narrowed my eyes, the icy aura radiating from me causing the temperature in the room to drop a few degrees. I growled, my deep voice laced with supreme fury. Lam Nhu, are you talking about the waste station on the hill behind the school? Seeing my face change, Lam Nhu grew even more triumphant. She raised her eyebrows, giving a sharp, arrogant nod as if she had just accomplished a heroic feat. At that moment, my chest felt like an invisible fire was burning inside, my anger so intense my lungs felt ready to burst. How malicious and vile must a person be to casually destroy someone else's belongings in such a cruel manner? Who at this school didn't know the horror of the waste station behind the hill? It wasn't just a place where trash gathered, it was a literal dead zone, a black hole of filth and decay. It collected the foulest waste from thousands of people, from pitch-black kitchen wastewater caked with thick grease, to countless rotten, wilted vegetable leaves emitting a sour stench, to leaking sewage from the septic systems. Worst of all were the discarded, decomposing feminine hygiene products baking under the scorching sun, giving off a stench so pungent it could make anyone walking past vomit green bile. I still vividly remembered the horror story from last year. A reckless thief had snuck onto campus to steal from students. After being caught red-handed by campus security to punish the scoundrel before handing him over to the police, the security team tied him up and tossed him straight into that waste facility. In less than 2 hours spent in that toxic air, the thief was choked by the stench, foaming at the mouth and passing out cold. The school ultimately had to call an ambulance to rush him to the ER for a stomach pump and emergency oxygen. No ordinary sane person dared to venture within a 100-meter radius of that place, let alone set foot inside. I was nice enough to give you the exact location. As for whether you have the guts to crawl into that pile of waste to fetch your trash back, that's entirely up to you. It has nothing to do with me. Lam Nhu casually strolled over to her plush chair and sank into it slowly. Crossing her legs and folding her arms, she assumed the air of a superior waiting leisurely to enjoy an upcoming comedy show. In her mind, she smugly thought, even if you put a gun to my head, I'd never step half a foot into that filthy, low-class place. Foolish people remain foolish forever. Lam Nhu had no idea that in the grand play about to unfold in this room, the unfortunate, pathetic lead doomed to be dragged through the mud wasn't me, it was her own smug self. I took a deep breath to regain my composure, the corners of my lips curling into a cold smile. My thumb glided lightly across my phone screen, decisively tapping the button to stop recording. That's right, Lam Nhu. Did you think I was a weak victim who could only cry? Truth is, I'm just like any netizen who pulls out their phone to record evidence whenever they run into an unfair or interesting situation. The entire sequence, from her arrogant confession of destroying property to her recent snobbish attitude, had been captured in crisp detail by my camera. Lam NHU had been eagerly waiting to see me flustered, panicked, or even begging on my knees before dragging myself to the waste station. Instead, what met her expectant, arrogant gaze was an extremely strange action. Right in front of her, I casually dialed a short number and pressed the phone to my ear. The number I dialed was 110, the police emergency hotline. Lam NHU froze, her eyes widening in sheer shock mixed with disbelief. She couldn't believe her ears. Over a pair of old, torn liberation shoes, this poor girl actually had the nerve to call the cops. She burst out laughing, her voice high and shrill with sharp mockery. Tran Tin Phi, have you lost your mind? Are you trying to waste public resources? Let me sit back and watch if the busy police have any time to waste on a nobody reporting a pair of lost shoes worth a few yuan. Just as Lam NHU expected, once connected, the warm, deep voice of an officer answered. After I clearly explained that my roommate had thrown away my green cloth liberation shoes, the officer on the line sighed softly, patiently explaining that under current legal regulations, a standard pair of liberation shoes held a market value of only a few to a dozen yuan. That amount was far too small to meet the minimum threshold for criminal property damage or theft to open a formal case. This petty dispute didn't fall under the direct jurisdiction of 110 officers. Hearing the faint reply from my phone's speaker, Lam NHU's pride exploded. Her face twitched from laughing so hard, her features virtually floating with joy. She slapped her knee, opening her mouth to hurl a barrage of insults at me. Yet before she could utter a single word, my next sentence rang out soft, yet carrying the weight of 1,000 tons, instantly freezing the smile on her face and turning her whole body to stone. I calmly, steadily asked the person on the other end of the line in a deeply serious tone. Officer, I completely understand the legal regulations. But may I ask, if the stolen and discarded cloth liberation shoes aren't standard work wear but a precious historical relic, a national-level revolutionary cultural artifact, what happens then? The moment the phrase cultural artifact left my mouth, the tone on the line changed completely. The casual, polite demeanor vanished without a trace, replaced by an intensely serious, urgent, and authoritative voice of the law. What, you're saying those shoes are a cultural artifact? If they truly are a historical relic, this is an extremely serious crime involving the destruction of national cultural heritage. Miss, stay right where you are, preserve the scene, and do not touch anything. We are dispatching a specialized unit to your location immediately. The call ended, leaving an eerie silence hanging over the room. At this point, though, a faint sense of dread began to creep into Lam NHU's heart, her innate arrogance and stupidity kept her from bowing to reality. She tried to cover her panic by forcing a stiff smile, pointing her red manicured finger at my face and shouting, Tran Tin Phi, stop putting on a show. Filing a false police report and spreading fake news is illegal. You can go to jail for that. Do you know that? Do you think the police are that easily fooled by you? You have the audacity to claim those raggedy, filthy shoes are a revolutionary artifact. That's hilariously absurd. Why don't you look at the cheap polyester shirt you're wearing? That rough, outdated fabric, even my grandmother in the countryside wouldn't wear it. Are you going to blabber on that that's an artifact from the Paleolithic era too? Hua Ji, her loyal little shadow, instantly jumped up to chime in. She sneered, using her sharp, grating tone to taunt. Exactly. Tran Tin Phi, aren't you ashamed of spewing such lies? If those smelly, torn shoes were truly a precious national relic, why were you casually wearing them every day? Aren't you afraid the ghost of their original owner will come back to haunt you and demand your life? Hearing her minions' seamless tag team effort, Lam NHU felt immensely satisfied. Her invisible fear was quickly swallowed by arrogance. She stood up abruptly, hands on her hips, aggressively stepping right up to my face and pointing at my nose in challenge. Exactly. Everyone in this room, listen up. Today I, Lam NHU, am placing a bet right here. If those torn shoes are actually a precious revolutionary artifact like you bullshit, I will eat poop live right in front of this entire dorm. With that, she raised her chin, her eyes glaring with threat. On the flip side, if those shoes are just trash and you're filing a false police report to scare me, then Tran Tin Phi. You won't just eat poop in front of everyone, you'll pack your shit and get the hell out of this dorm today. Do you dare to play? Looking at her aggressive, overconfident stance, I merely offered a cold, deeply contemptuous smile. I thought to myself, Lam NHU really has an undoable curse with poop. Normally she spent money like water, yet her supposedly high-end luxury bag was a cheap knockoff that reeked like a walking pile of manure. And now, even when entering a life-or-death gamble deciding her fate, the first thing her mind jumped to for an oath was eating poop. I could only shake my head at her extreme ignorance, offering her my deepest sympathies in advance, because in this gamble, Lam NHU had dug her own grave and she was guaranteed to lose miserably. There was a massive secret that neither Lam NHU nor Hua Gi could have ever guessed. The rough, old liberation shoes I wore to class every day and the ones kept carefully inside the locked metal box under my bed were not the same pair at all. The liberation shoes sitting quietly inside that leather-bound wooden box were indeed a priceless revolutionary artifact, a real, heroic historic relic that my grandfather had meticulously collected and preserved for decades. My grandfather was a direct descendant of a brave Red Army soldier who had lived through the brutal, bomb-riddled years of war. From his youth, he held a passionate, almost sacred devotion toward keepsakes and artifacts tied to the nation's heroic revolutionary history. My father was a deeply filial son and a successful businessman holding immense wealth. To fulfill my grandfather's lifelong dream and give him a place to preserve his historical treasures, my father hadn't hesitated to spend over 100 million yuan to build a massive private museum dedicated to revolutionary artifacts right in the heart of the city. Just a few weeks after our university opened, the Municipal Cultural Relics Bureau planned to collaborate with universities for a national educational program titled Revolutionary Relics Enter Campus Life, to serve the upcoming special exhibition. The Bureau sent representatives to negotiate and borrow the Red Army soldiers' liberation shoes from my grandfather's collection to serve as the main display item. However, my grandfather was advanced in age and occasionally forgetful. When packing the parcel for the exhibition, he made a mistake with the shipping address, sending it directly to my school. These shoes already came with official, professional authentication certificates issued and stamped in bright red by the Municipal Cultural Relics Bureau itself. If my memory served me right, based on the detailed records in my grandfather's notebook, it held the honor of being classified as a Class 1 National Revolutionary Cultural Relics, carrying invaluable historical significance and an estimated financial value that was by no means small. While the atmosphere in the dorm room was stretched as tight as a snapping wire, the sound of heavy, hurried footsteps outside in the hallway broke the suffocating silence. The police arrived swiftly at the scene. 2 officers stepped inside, one tall, one short, neatly uniformed, carrying an authoritative aura of law enforcement that made the cramped room feel instantly more pressurized. "Who called the police?" Officer Cao, a tall man with a firm, square jaw, scanned the room before asking in a deep voice. Lam NHU seemed to have been waiting for just this moment. She leaped up instantly, her slender arm with its meticulously painted fingernails pointing straight at my face. Her voice dripping with spite, it was her. Then, turning immediately to the officer, she put on a fake, innocent face. Though her eyes sparkled with supreme triumph, "Officer, making a false police report to intentionally cause trouble and waste public resources means going to jail." "Right." Officer Cao knit his brows, throwing her a sharp glance that made Lam NHU pull her neck back. He raised his hand in a firm gesture, ordering her not to speak out of line without permission. Turning back to me, his eyes were inquiring yet maintained the measured composure of an enforcer of justice. Did you make the report? I stood tall without a trace of hesitation or fear, nodding calmly. Yes, I did. Officer Cow looked at the old wooden box on the desk, his voice steady yet heavy. How do you prove the liberation shoes in the box are a cultural artifact? We need solid evidence, not just unverified claims. I offered a gentle smile, walking unhurriedly over to the desk to open the specialized box. On the inner side of the lid, where the wood had been smoothed down, a long series of dark numbers was burnt into the wood. I pointed at it, explaining, every artifact entered into the management registry receives a unique, one-of-a-kind identification serial number. This sequence is its official ID card. I calmly pulled my phone from my pocket, my fingers moving across the screen as I continued. To prove it, I can call the Municipal Cultural Relics Bureau directly to verify this information right here. Standing nearby, Lam NHU burst out laughing at those words, her tone full of intense mockery and disdain. Today is Sunday. The Cultural Relics Bureau isn't even open. That random string of numbers was probably carved by you with a knife to fool people. Classic poor person's desperate trick. Exactly. Hua Gi chimed in as if she'd struck gold, rushing forward with brown-nosing enthusiasm, looking at me like I was insane. Why would such a precious revolutionary artifact be casually given to a poor, ordinary student like you to keep, let alone letting you bring it all the way to a shared dorm room? Do you think the police and the rest of us are 3-year-old children? Who are you trying to fool? Officer Cow lowered his voice, his expression stern as he looked at me. What these students are saying makes sense. Student, I must warn you in advance, filing a false report is no joking matter, and you will bear full legal responsibility. Do you truly understand and stand ready to face the consequences of your actions? I didn't flinch, looking straight into his sharp eyes, my voice loud and clear. I am fully aware of what I am doing. I guarantee every word I've said is the absolute truth. Officer Cow nodded, his attitude shifting slightly at my conviction. All right, make the call. I immediately dialed the number I knew by heart. This wasn't a general hotline, but the direct personal contact number of the department head in charge of receiving artifacts, a number Director Liu himself had respectfully given to my grandfather during their meeting. The phone rang only twice before someone picked up. Once I stated my identity and my grandfather's name. The person on the other end seemed to freeze for a second, after which his tone instantly became warm, respectful, and polite over the speakerphone. Student Tran, what an absolute honor. We are immensely grateful to your grandfather for agreeing to donate his collection of revolutionary artifacts to the Municipal Bureau. This is a grand contribution to history. Knowing the situation was urgent, I didn't have time for drawn-out pleasantries. I interrupted politely and concisely, laid out the entire situation unfolding in the dorm. This precious artifact had only recently completed its donation paperwork, while the Bureau had indeed issued my family the specialized box and this offline management code. Bureaucratic delays meant the official public database might not have synced the information online yet. Right now, I needed them to immediately confirm the identity and actual value of these liberation shoes to assist the police officers on site. Sure enough, the official on the line sounded deeply apologetic upon understanding the situation. I am so terribly sorry. The online database system hasn't updated that quickly. It won't be fully integrated until next week. But if you and the police officers need immediate proof, I can take a photo of the official artifact authentication certificate and send it to you right now. Lam NHU stood frozen in place, every single word coming from the speakerphone hitting her eardrums like a sledgehammer. Her arrogant facade cracked apart. In her wildest dreams, she could never have imagined that the old, dusty, foul-smelling liberation shoes she had contemptuously tossed into the trash were actually a state-protected historical artifact. What's more, it was a treasure my family was preparing to donate to the city's main museum. Less than a minute later, a text chime shattered the dead silence. When the crisp, clear image of the official artifact authentication certificate downloaded onto my screen, Lam Nhu's face turned from bright red to deathly pale. Drained of all blood, her lips trembling uncontrollably. On the document, stamped with a prominent red official seal, were the clear words, Class 1 Cultural Relic, estimated value 1,090,000 yuan. I raised an eyebrow, crossing my arms, throwing a cold glance straight at her ash-gray face, speaking with sharp irony. Well then, Miss Lam, so when is Lam Nhu performing her live poop-eating show for us? I recall someone boasting pretty loudly just now. Lai Mong stood beside me, witnessing the breathtaking reversal, and let out a loud, sarcastic laugh full of satisfaction and contempt. I doubt she'll even get the chance to eat poop, I added nonchalantly, looking at Lam Nhu. With a value like that, she might just be going inside to eat prison food. Yet Lam Nhu was arrogant to her core, accustomed to being spoiled. She wasn't the type to easily bow her head or admit defeat in front of others. Even with things blown wide open and concrete proof right before her eyes, she stubbornly dug her heels in, straining her neck to argue hysterically. You have zero proof that I was the one who threw those shoes away. If you ask me, Tran Tin Phi lost her own shoes and cooked up this wicked scheme to extort money from me. This country bumpkin is jealous because my family has money, always looking to climb social ladders. She was eyeing my designer bag and envied my level sweatshirt, so she set up this whole trick to frame me. I watched her play the fool with cold detachment, my gaze like looking at a lunatic thrashing in a mud pit. You want proof, don't you? Open your eyes wide and take a good look. With that, I calmly swiped across my phone screen, opened my photo gallery, and played the video clip I had discreetly recorded earlier. On the screen, Lam Nhu's arrogant, nose-in-the-air posture and haughty tone were captured in high definition, her loud voice echoing through the small room right before the two stern police officers. Yeah, I opened your box. So what? Helping you throw away those raggedy shoes was doing you a favor. Every single word, every detail of her lawless attitude was captured crystal clear. I looked straight into her trembling face, letting out a cold smirk. Lam Nhu, since you insisted on having proof slapped onto your face, I had to oblige. You brought this entirely upon yourself. The video finished playing, and Lam Nhu looked like a car that had suddenly stalled mid-highway. She went dead silent, unable to utter a single word, her knees shaking so violently she looked ready to collapse onto the floor. Seeing that we were still university students with long futures ahead, Officer Cao let out a soft sigh, deciding to attempt mediation first to see if both sides could settle it privately, clearing his throat. He looked at the terrified girl and said, "Student Lam, you have two choices right now. 1. Quickly go find that exact historic shoe and bring it back here completely intact. 2. Pay full damages to the victim based on the official appraised value provided by the Cultural Relics Bureau." The tall officer's words rang out coldly, slicing through the suffocating silence in the room. His sharp eyes locked onto Lam Nhu's drained, bloodless face. Slowly, his gaze shifted downward, stopping at the glossy black calfskin Chanel bag hanging from her shoulder, his lips curling slightly. "I see that Chanel bag alone has a market value of around 60,000 yuan for a young lady decked out in designer gear like you. Coming up with 1,090,000 yuan in compensation shouldn't be too difficult, right?" The officer's words fell like ice water over Lam Nhu's head, causing her entire body to freeze like a broken wax figure. Yet Hua Ji, standing nearby, failed to notice her friend's terrifying shift in expression. Her foolish mind and long-standing habit of suck-up flattery blinded her. Hua Ji stepped forward instantly, looking smug and bossy, chiming in loudly, "That's right, officer. Nhu's family are true tycoons. They have more money than they could spend in 3 lifetimes. Nhu, hurry up and call your dad. Tell him to transfer 1.09 million yuan right now." Slap that cash straight onto Tran Tin Phi's face and see if she dares act so arrogant ever again. Every single word from Hua Ji hit Lam Nhu Enhu's frayed nerves like heavy hammer blows. She stood frozen in place, her lips trembling, unable to squeeze out a single word. Her body remained rigid under everyone's scrutinizing glares. Standing against the wall, arms crossed, I let out a slow, cold smirk. My laugh echoed in the quiet room, cutting bitterly to the bone. What's wrong? It's just a little over $1,000,000 and Miss Lam is already crying poor. Splurging every day, buying 60,000 yuan designer bags without blinking, wearing sweatshirts worth tens of thousands, yet when trouble hits and you're asked to pay for damages you personally caused, suddenly you don't have the money. My mocking words struck right at Lam Nhu Enhu's fragile vanity. Her face flushed from pale white to bright crimson with humiliation. Gritting her teeth, her furious eyes glared at me as if she wanted to swallow me whole, hissed through her teeth, "It's just $1,000,000. Who are you looking down on? I'm calling my dad right now." With that, she snatched her phone out, her fingers trembling wildly as she swiped to find her contacts. From my angle, a single glance was all it took to recognize the extremely familiar phone number displaying on her screen. It was driver Ma's private number, the loyal driver who had worked for my family for over a decade. Driver Ma. The moment the call connected, Lam Nhu rushed to speak, her tone frantic yet trembling, trying hard to maintain the spoiled demeanor of a rich girl speaking to her wealthy father. However, driver Ma's deep, flustered voice came through the speakerphone. Nhu, I just scraped together all my cash to buy a plot of land in the suburbs. I really don't have that much liquid cash on hand right now, kiddo. Hearing this, I had to exert all my willpower not to burst out laughing. I truly hadn't expected someone as honest and down-to-earth as driver Ma to play the reluctant tycoon so naturally in front of a clout chaser like Lam Nhu. But thinking back, my family had recently invested in a large plot of land. It was just that the tone and way of speaking between driver Ma and Lam Nhu sounded nothing like a normal father-daughter relationship. It was awkward, distant, and filled with ridiculous gaps that only someone blinded by superficial glitter like Hua Ji could miss. Seeing Lam Nhu stay on the phone for ages without producing a single cent, Officer Cao lost his patience. His face darkened and he decisively reached behind his waist, pulling out a pair of cold steel handcuffs. The sharp, metallic clinking echoed crisp and loud in the room, completely shattering the last bit of Lam Nhu's psychological defense. Her legs shook uncontrollably, her knees buckling as she nearly sank to the floor. Panic consumed her face, tears welling up as she saw the handcuffs heading her way. Sobbing, her voice quavered in desperation, "Officer, I beg you. If I go find those shoes and bring them back right now, can I not be taken away? Can I avoid going to jail?" Officer Cao narrowed his eyes, his demeanor cold and firm as he replied in a deep voice, "Find those shoes and bring them back completely intact first, then we'll talk." I had assumed the two officers would escort Lam Nhu directly to the school waste station to supervise her search. However, the horror story of the thief locked in the waste station overnight, getting knocked unconscious by the toxic stench and rushed to the ICU was perhaps too deeply etched in everyone's minds. The two officers exchanged glances. Coming to a very wise and humane decision for the sake of their own noses, "Student Lam, we will take you to the sports field right next to the waste disposal area. As for the narrow, rugged path leading up to the waste station itself, we won't be climbing up there. You go in and search by yourself." To ensure Lam Nhu wouldn't cheat or run away, the officers deployed a specialized police drone to hover and track her movement. The high-tech police gear was impressive. The feed transmitted back to the controller screen was crystal clear down to the finest detail, even picking up ambient audio clearly without missing a sound. On the screen, the scene inside the waste station looked utterly horrific and nauseating. It was a realm of pure decay, discarded, soiled sanitary products stuck to trash, buckets of sour, leftover cafeteria slop. Rotting leafy vegetables dripping dark water and long decomposed domestic waste piled high like mountains, leaking a greasy, grayish sludge. Naturally, standing right in the middle of this massive pile of trash was a piece of human garbage named Lamb NHU. Through the sharp footage, we could clearly see Lamb NHU dry heaving violently, her face bright red, her feet sinking deep into the black kitchen sludge mixed with foul sewage flowing across the ground. Her expensive designer shoes were completely stained black with grime. To locate the historical shoes, she was forced to crawl on all fours over the towering mound of trash, dropping her face close to the foul waste to dig through every corner. Around her crawling figure, countless fat white maggots squirmed over rotten meat and decaying vegetables, creating a stomach-churning sight. Her miserable wails and gags echoed continuously through the controller's speaker across the sports field. I watched the screen for a bit, feeling my stomach churn with nausea at the overly vivid visuals. Unwilling to continue torturing my eyes, I turned away from the windy sports field and walked slowly back to the dorm. Now, my only job was to wait quietly for Lamb NHU to return, reeking of sewage and trash, to face her music. At exactly 9 in the evening, my phone on the desk buzzed, the screen lighting up with a WeChat message from Lamb NHU. Immediately after, the officer's phone number called mine. Student Tran, please open the photo Student Lamb just sent via WeChat and verify if those are indeed your missing historical shoes. I hung up and opened the message. On the screen was a photo of a pair of old Liberation shoes, caked in mud and debris, but inside the collar of the shoe, a name embroidered meticulously in red thread was still visible, the mark proving it was the item set to be donated to the Cultural Relics Bureau. I looked closely at the photo and sent a brief, firm reply to the police. Yes, those are the shoes. By 10 at night, the atmosphere in our dorm room had temporarily regained its usual peace. Everyone had finished showering, changing into comfortable sleepwear, and lounging on their beds, scrolling on their phones or reading books. But that peace didn't last long. Just as we were settling down to sleep, Hua Ji suddenly bolted upright, screaming in terror, "What the hell is this? Did someone lose control of their bowels and drag poop onto their bed? Why does it stink so damn bad?" Right after Hua Ji's scream, another girl across the room sat up, pinching her nose and yelling, "Good Lord. Why is this smell worse than an unclean public restroom? How can anyone breathe in here?" Before she could even finish her sentence, she leaned over the edge of her bed, dry heaving violently as the pungent, foul odor hit her nostrils. Everyone in the room grabbed blankets or used their hands to cover their noses, sticking their heads out from behind their bed curtains to locate the source of the horrific stench spreading at lightning speed. Someone voiced a suspicion in a trembling voice. Did the school's septic tank explode? Another girl suspected the stench was blowing in from the hallway window, jumping off her bed and rushing to throw the window wide open. Sticking her head outside to check the air, yet she turned back into the room confused, coughing as she spoke, That's weird, it's totally fresh outside, no smell at all." Just then, Lamb NHU appeared at the dorm door. Her hair was a tangled, matted mess sticking together, her entire person looking like a demon crawling out from the deepest depths of hell. Clinging to her filthy, slimy hair were bits of rotten vegetable leaves, sour, fermented rice grains, and various unnameable, nauseating substances. The foul stench radiating from her body reached an absolute peak, like an ancient septic tank bursting open, causing everyone in the room to pinch their noses tight and dry heave uncontrollably. Get out right now." Hua Ji, her most loyal lapdog who usually fawned over her daily, was the very first to jump up onto her bed, her face twisted in terror and disgust, screaming hysterically. Hua Ji's eyes were sharp. In her panicked dodging, she suddenly stared at the top of Lamb NHU's head, pointing a finger, her voice cracking in horror. On Lamb NHU's hair there's a white thing crawling. Oh my god, maggots. It's maggots. Hua Ji's words acted like a spark lighting a fuse of absolute horror. The entire dorm erupted into an earth-shattering wave of gagging, high-pitched shrieks mixed with tearful cries of disgust echoing down the hallway. Looking at the two police officers accompanying her seasoned, tough men who had seen it all, even they were so overwhelmed by the apocalyptic stench that their eyes looked dazed, their faces turning pale and sickly green as they struggled. Humiliated and frantic, Lam Nhu tried to burst into the room to grab her personal belongings. However, the female students, driven by extreme fear and disgust, instantly grabbed whatever was within arm's reach: clothes hangers, plastic tubs, books, flip-flops, and pelted them relentlessly at her, determined not to let her step anywhere near the beds. Ultimately, under a shower of flying objects and shunning gazes treating her like an evil spirit, she could only frantically grab a few dusty clothes off the line and dash straight into the bathroom like a cornered wild animal. Amid that chaos, I quietly pulled out my phone, my fingers flying across the screen to text Driver Ma. Driver Ma, do you want to borrow 200,000 yuan? I'll transfer it to you right now. In truth, ever since afternoon, right after Lam Nhu had called screaming at Driver Ma for money, he had secretly messaged me in desperate plea. Driver Ma mentioned he had scrambled everywhere, begging every contact he had, but was still short 200,000 yuan. Asking to borrow it from me and promising to work hard to pay it back. At the time, I had only given a slow, ambiguous response: I need to think about it. Timing was everything in this game. If that 200,000 yuan had been given to Lam Nhu before the police found the historical shoes, it would have become her protective armor, allowing her to easily bribe her way out of her mistake and remain arrogant. But if that money was delivered after the shoes were found, after she had personally tasted absolute humiliation, it turned into a fatal blow that tore her heart to shreds. Sure enough, just seconds after the transfer went through, desperate wailing cries erupted from inside the bathroom. The sound pierced through the door cracks, hoarse, frantic, and dripping with resentment. What good is giving me money now? It's too late. It's way too late. Do you have any idea what kind of hell I went through today? Maggots were crawling all over me, on my legs, my arms, even my face. I'm covered in disgusting, rotting filth. I had to vomit while digging through trash with my bare hands to find those damn shoes at the school dump. I was trapped in that filthy pit for over 10 hours. Now you tell me you have money. A lowlife like you actually wants to marry my mother. You want to be my stepfather. Give up now. I suspect all your boasts about being rich were just a scam to fool me and my mom. Immediately following those crazy shrieks came a deafening crash. Her smartphone was slammed viciously against the tile floor, shattering into 100 pieces. Next, Lam Nhu slammed the bathroom door shut, her face flushed crimson with humiliation, sprinting crazily out of the dorm. Only then did I fully understand the entire backstory. I understood why Driver Ma proudly referred to Lam Nhu as his daughter, while Lam Nhu only addressed him as uncle with contempt. I understood why Driver Ma had gone to such painful lengths to deceive her, pretending to be a wealthy, influential man. As it turned out, Driver Ma wanted to play the role of a rich tycoon to win over and marry Lam Nhu's mother, agreeing to shoulder the superficial demands of both mother and daughter. The incident finally reached its conclusion when the embroidered historical shoes were delivered to the Cultural Relics Bureau intact, despite their turbulent journey. After experts conducted a thorough inspection, they confirmed that the historical and financial value of the artifact hadn't been severely compromised. However, because the act of destroying and appropriating cultural property was so egregious, Lam Nhu was still brought to the police station for a stern reprimand and behavioral re-education for several days. That stain would remain permanently on her personal record. On top of that, the court ordered her to pay me 300,000 yuan in compensation for severe emotional distress. knowing the money driver Ma borrowed from me hadn't actually been spent yet. I found a reasonable excuse to have him transfer it back to me. The matter was temporarily put to rest in a state of fragile peace. By the time Lam NHU returned to the dorm from the police station, everyone in the room gave her the cold shoulder, no one bothering to care about or speak to her anymore. I had also thought that after receiving such a bloody, expensive lesson, she would at least remember it deeply, lay low, and stop pulling schemes to hurt people. But I had drastically underestimated Lam NHU. Her heart was naturally narrow and selfish, smaller than a grain of chicken poop. The resentment in her eyes only deepened. As time passed, the pandemic situation gradually improved, life returned to its normal track, and the film and television industry began a powerful revival. Right at this moment, a piece of bombshell news broke. Thien Kim Film Group decided to invest a massive budget of up to 500 million yuan to produce a blockbuster titled The Princess of Nam Than. The film would host a massive public audition right at our drama academy to find fresh faces. The director of the project was none other than Truong Mumu, a legendary director famous for seeking out female leads with pure, innocent, and holy beauty. Most importantly, history had proven that any actress he championed would swiftly ascend to glory, becoming an A-list star. Upon hearing this hot news, all the students at the academy were wild with excitement, as if preparing for a grand festival. Everyone went into overdrive night and day, grinding specialized knowledge while frantically preparing their portfolios. To be lucky enough to join a mega project of this scale right in freshman year meant an artist's future path would practically be carpeted in red and illuminated by the brilliant spotlight of fame. For those of us in the acting department, this was an absolute once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, a golden key to unlock the doors to the pinnacle of the entertainment world. During that stormy period, I practically cut off all outside contact, rarely returning home. Although my first film shot during the summer break had brought a few small accolades to polish my portfolio, I understood full well that in this cutthroat, high-elimination entertainment industry, core professional skills were the true root sustaining all fame. I threw myself into the practice rooms like a moth to a flame, desperately patching up weaknesses, refining every gaze and vocal delivery for the upcoming life-or-death battle. Meanwhile, Lam NHU was unusually busy as well. She constantly hovered in and out, leaving early and returning late with deeply secretive movements. I had no idea what she was plotting during those late-night trips, but one thing was certain: she completely abandoned her studies. With empty class seats and consecutive missed roll calls, Lam NHU seemed to have found another world outside the lecture halls. Then, after a short while, she underwent a complete transformation, overnight becoming a genuinely wealthy person. This time, her wealth wasn't a clumsy cover of cheap knockoffs or resold second-hand items. The expensive handbags and trendy outfits she brought back to the dorm were all genuine luxury creations bearing famous designer labels, purchased directly from the grandest flagship boutiques. To reclaim her lost dominance and re-establish the power dynamic in the dorm room, Lam NHU began executing calculated acts of lavish generosity. She threw money around, gifting everyone in the room an expensive level designer bag. The sight of those girls cheering and cradling those pricey gifts in their hands looked like loyal subjects bowing before the grace of a queen. Naturally, Lai Mong and I were completely excluded from her gift list. Money truly possessed a monstrous, omnipotent power. With just a few designer bags, Lam NHU's image in the eyes of her classmates was instantly elevated to a glittering, worship-worthy pedestal. Not stopping there, she bragged constantly about her intimate connections with key figures in the film crew. She boldly declared that with just a single word to the casting director, securing a lucrative supporting role for her minions would be child's play. This captivating promise transformed her roommates into loyal lapdogs, serving her hand and foot. They didn't just fight to take roll call for her or line up to buy her meals every day. they even vied to do her laundry. From everyday clothes down to her most private undergarments. The audition race entered a suffocating phase. After a strict portfolio screening that eliminated thousands of applicants, followed by 2 rounds of intense live auditions before the judges, and 3 grueling comprehensive performance rounds that drained both body and mind, the final shortlist for the lead female role came down to just 2 names at the top. Me and Lam NHU, but who would ultimately touch the crown? The powerful associate director remained vague, stating that the crew and investors still needed private meetings to carefully deliberate. That very night, my phone rang, breaking the quiet ambience. It was my father calling. His deep, warm, yet authoritative voice came through the receiver. "My darling, my assistant reported that you made it to the final round for the female lead, right? Do you need me to call the director directly and have them lock in the role for you right now?" Hearing those words, I could only smile softly. That's right, the man talking to me in such an immensely doting tone was the chairman of Thien Kim Film Group, the media giant that had dropped a massive 500 million yuan budget to produce the blockbuster The Princess of Nam Than. And obviously, this was just a small piece of my family's massive multi-industry empire. To be precise, film and entertainment were merely a side business and artistic playground for our family. The reason I strictly refused my father's intervention in the casting process was that from the very beginning he had been fiercely opposed to me entering this rocky entertainment industry. In his eyes, show business was a chaotic swamp full of dirty, unwritten rules and traps waiting to swallow young girls. Though he respected my dreams and let me freely choose my acting major, deep down he harbored the hope that after graduation I would pursue a master's in finance, then officially step into the family corporation to take over our vast empire. If my acting career relied on his influence and connections, he would later use it as the perfect excuse to convince me to give up my passion. Therefore, I wanted to stand on my own 2 feet, fighting with pure talent to prove myself. However, the reality before me was anything but peaceful. Lately, Lam NHU came back to the room drunk every night, stumbling around at 3 in the morning. Her slurred laughing and heavy reek of alcohol repeatedly shattered my sleep. Meanwhile, the associate director had just issued an urgent notice that there would be one final, decisive audition round to fully evaluate the capabilities of the 2 final candidates, to ensure I was in peak mental and physical shape for this deciding battle. I decided to move out, staying in our luxury villa located right next to campus. The villa was already lavishly decorated and fully furnished, with housekeepers cleaning it daily, so I only needed to bring my personal suitcase to move in immediately. The distance from the villa to school was just a few minutes' walk, and my luggage was light with just a small rolling suitcase, so I decided to walk to breathe in the fresh air and relax my tense mind. Yet halfway there, the smooth yet powerful hum of an engine sounded, and a glossy black, breathtakingly luxurious Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled up sharply beside me. I reflexively glanced at the license plate. My chest tightened and the corners of my mouth curled into a subtle smile. This license plate, isn't it the exact luxury car parked in my family's garage? The tinted glass window rolled down slowly, revealing Lam NHU's face brimming with supreme triumph. She looked down at me with contempt, sneering in a biting voice, "What's wrong, Tran Tin Phi? I compensated you a whole 300,000 yuan for emotional distress. Is that money still not enough for you to afford a simple taxi, forcing you to trudge along on foot like this?" Seeing my eyes fixed on the car, Lam NHU pushed her advantage further. She ran her manicured fingers gently along the fine wood trim of the door frame, deliberately striking a noble, high society pose. Introducing loudly, "This car is called a Zoe Phantom, you know. There's only one in this entire city. Knowing a broke nobody like you has never laid eyes on a hyperluxury car like this, I specifically told the driver to stop and bestow a little time for you to open your eyes." Yet right behind her smug, absurd face, my eyes caught the figure sitting in the driver's seat. Sweat beaded like large pearls on the forehead of driver Ma, the loyal driver who had served my family for so many years. His face was completely drained of color, his eyes panicked and trembling as he looked at me through the rearview mirror as if he had just committed a cardinal sin. I raised an eyebrow, letting out a deep, meaningful smile and spoke up, really. As it happens, I'd like to take a ride too. Lam NHU instantly glared at me, her sharp, contemptuous gaze shooting straight my way. Her heavily powdered face contorted in shock mixed with fury, as if I had just uttered the ultimate blasphemy. A ragged person like you thinks she's worthy of stepping into this royal space. She sneered, her tone razor thin. Then, without sparing me another glance, she raised her chin toward the driver's seat, issuing a bossy command in her self-proclaimed heiress tone, "Dad, let's go. Don't let this kind of person pollute our eyes." Standing outside, the corners of my lips curled into a cold smile as I spoke up nonchalantly, "Oh so." I stood outside, the corners of my lips slightly curved into a cold smile and said leisurely, "Oh, it seems Uncle Ma's rich guy act was quite a success, huh?" Sure enough, money truly speaks. Lam NHU changed her tune so fast, officially calling him Dad in such a sweet, natural voice. Yet the hilarious part was that the ultra-luxury car worth tens of millions of yuan didn't budge at the supreme command of this newly minted heiress. Instead, with a soft click, the smart soft closed door system obediently popped open right in front of me like a private pathway laid out on a red carpet. Without standing on ceremony, I dragged my crude travel suitcase with one hand and decisively swung the door open with the other. Sitting straight onto the high-end leather seat inside, Lam NHU reacted as if a needle had pricked her bottom. She threw a fit in her seat. Her face flushed red with rage as she shrieked out of control, "Dad, what's wrong with you? Why are you letting this dirty country bumpkin into the car? Do you even know how much this car is worth?" The answer to her ear-splitting screech was only a suffocating, dead silence. Uncle Ma didn't utter a single word. Through the glossy rearview mirror, I took in the full view of his ash-pale face, completely drained of color. Uncle Ma stole a cautious glance at me, his eyes filled with immense unease, anxiety, and sheer terror. His hands trembled violently on the steering wheel and cold sweat continuously beaded on his forehead before running down his cheeks. To be honest, just thinking about breathing the same air in a car owned by my family alongside a snobbish, deceitful person like Lam NHU made me feel utterly disgusted and unlucky. But curiosity won over. I wanted to stick around and see what kind of poison this fake father-daughter duo was brewing in their broken gourd. The car glided smoothly over the asphalt, then turned into the artistic cast-iron gates of a magnificent villa, slowly coming to a halt in the middle of a spacious front courtyard. I scanned the surroundings, a spark of suspicion running down my spine. This address, this view. Why did it look so familiar? My brain quickly recalled old information. Wasn't this the standalone villa located in the gated residential area right next to my university? This house had been fully furnished with the most luxurious interior pieces bought by my parents for my convenience while studying. Knowing my special passion for swimming, my mother had taken great pains to select the unit with this gorgeous outdoor infinity pool design. However, since this was also the first time I was setting foot here in person, I couldn't be 100% sure yet. No sooner said than done, I quietly took a photo of the villa's side profile on my phone and sent it straight to my mother to verify. Just as my phone notified me that the message had been sent, a group of people dressed elegantly and luxuriously as if they had been waiting on standby for a long time poured out from the main hall of the villa to welcome us. The moment they saw Uncle Ma step out of the car, they immediately leaned forward, bowing and scraping, their faces stretching into sickeningly flattering smiles. Endless praises and compliments echoed across the wide yard. "Welcome, President Ma. Ah, President Ma, seeing you once is better than hearing about you 100 times. Your presence is truly extraordinary. Thank you for gracing us with an invitation to this cozy family gathering, President Ma." Oh, and this is a modest gift we personally prepared for the young heiress. It isn't worth much, but we hope you will accept it and not look down on our sincerity. Within a few brief seconds, Lamb NHU's arms were stacked high with large and small gift boxes, their exquisite packaging embossed with the logos of the world's most luxurious fashion and cosmetics brands. I casually glanced over those glossy paper bags, quickly estimating that even the least valuable item among them must cost a few 100,000 yuan. Lamb NHU was naturally greedy. But her fake heiress body couldn't handle the weight of the pile of gifts, and she began to lose her patience. Her face darkened, and she spun around, barking arrogantly at the flattering sycophants trailing behind her. "What are you useless bunch standing there staring for? Hurry over and help me carry these." Though scolded, those people looked as overjoyed as if they had struck gold. They hastily and subserviently took the heap of gift boxes from her hands, then dutifully followed her inside the villa one after another. Uncle Ma walked behind, stealing a guilty, pleading glance at me. But things had gone too far. This deceitful play had been staged so elaborately that he was now riding a tiger and couldn't get off. Even if he didn't want to keep acting, the wheels of fate forced him to play his role frantically. After all, the crowd surrounded him like tiny stars surrounding a bright moon, reverently holding him up with every step he took into the house. Inside the spacious living room designed in a European royal style, a middle-aged woman was already waiting, seated on a costly cowhide leather sofa. Seeing her, the group of flatterers immediately swarmed over, greeting her with utmost deference. The woman was dressed extremely lavishly in a noble gold-embroidered cheongsam, a shiny pearl necklace draped around her neck, radiating a truly superior aura of elegance. In the luxurious living room, the crowd continuously used the most florid words to raise Uncle Ma up to the clouds. A chubby, middle-aged man with a potbelly stepped forward, carrying an exquisite box made of red wood. Lowering his voice, he pleaded, "President Ma, my new feature film project has already secured a famous director and the script is superb. Right now, every journey begins with a first step, and we are only lacking a bit of seed capital. Everyone in our circle knows how formidable the financial strength of Thien Kim Film Group is. You are the general manager holding the ultimate decision-making power there. All investment and production matters depend entirely on your nod. This is a unique, modest gift I went through great lengths to hunt down. I hope you will accept it, President Ma, as a token of my sincerity." Hearing those words, Uncle Ma felt his heart leap into his throat. He stole a terrified look in my direction, then, as if shocked by electricity, frantically waved his hands to push the precious wooden box back. "No need, no need. We can discuss this later." To cover up the surging panic within him, he stood up abruptly, taking a deep breath to regain his calm demeanor. Forcing an authoritative tone, he spoke firmly, "How about this? Let's move to the adjacent reception room to discuss the specific details so we don't make a racket here." I raised an eyebrow as I observed him. I had to admit that when he tried his best to pull off this role, his aura did resemble that of a powerful general manager. No wonder those profit-seeking people didn't suspect a thing. Meanwhile, Lam NHU's hands were sore from accepting gifts. Holding a stack of expensive designer items to her chest, she couldn't stop smiling. By now, her mind was completely blinded by wealth, and she had long thrown my existence to the back of her head. But that made sense. In her narrow and twisted worldview, I was currently nothing more than a pitiful country girl cowering in the corner, watching her splendor and luxury with envious eyes. Lam NHU flashed her brightest smile, strutted over to the elegant woman, wrapped her arms around the woman's arm, and called out sweetly, "Mom." She then leaned close to the woman's ear, lowering her voice to a whisper, though her extreme excitement still reached my ears. "Mom, I really didn't expect Dad Ma to be so filthy rich. Goodness, before this, I even suspected he was just a dirt-poor scammer trying to put on airs." Hearing her daughter say this, the woman let out a smug chuckle. Stroking her hands laden with diamond rings, she replied in a pompous tone, "What do you know? Your dad Ma has been head over heels for me, desperately pursuing me for so many years. He stayed single and refused to marry anyone just to wait for my yes. In the past, when he drove me around, I thought he was just a poor driver. Who knew he was only playing poor because he was afraid other women would come to him just for his massive fortune. But let me tell you, if he were truly a dirt poor nobody with no money, there's no way I would have bothered signing that marriage certificate." Listening to the completely unhidden conversation between the mother and daughter, I suddenly understood the whole ridiculous truth. It turned out Uncle Ma had staged this act of playing a wealthy tycoon, impersonating the general manager of Thien Kim Film Group everywhere to deceive and marry this money-grubbing woman. Meanwhile, the woman and Lam Nhu were convinced they had caught a big fish, blissfully enjoying an illusion of luxury. I coldly pulled out my phone, framed a crystal-clear shot of the face of the woman referred to as Mrs. Ma, and sent it to my mother right away. Less than 10 seconds later, my phone screen lit up with a giant question mark of pure shock from my mom. Immediately after, a voice message arrived. I held the phone to my ear and my mother's familiar voice rang out, filled with astonishment mixed with anger. "Oh, Tin Phi. Isn't that the hourly maid Uncle Ma introduced to clean our house a while ago? She used to look so simple and plain. Why is she dressed so flashily with such heavy makeup today, sweetie?" Listening to the voice message, a sudden chill ran down my spine, giving me goosebumps all over. This farce was truly beyond my imagination. Among the 3 people acting out this play in this villa, not a single one possessed a genuine heart. The mother and daughter, Lam Nhu, were only by Uncle Ma's side to dig for gold, craving fame and fortune, while Uncle Ma, in order to maintain a relationship filled with lies and calculation, had grown so brazen that he was completely out of control. Greed, like a parasitic weed, sucked away the last shred of dignity from the heart of a man who was originally just a servant. Initially, when greed was only a spark, he only dared to sneak into my dressing room, rummaging through and taking expensive designer clothes that I had never even touched to present as gifts and flatter others. However, the invisible indulgence of fate had awakened the wild beast within him more fiercely than ever. Now his delusional pride had pushed him past the red line. He had dared to start my family's regal Rolls-Royce Phantom without permission, arrogantly driving it through busy streets as if he were the true owner of that massive fortune. Not stopping at borrowing a reputation to satisfy his vanity, he even had the audacity to fake the identity of the powerful general manager of Thien Kim Film Group, brazenly accepting lavish gifts and collecting massive bribes from those desperate for fame. In the shadows of deceit, no one knew what terrifying, earth-shattering things a man who had lost his soul like him might ruthlessly do just to protect this shiny yet hollow fake identity. The chill down my spine turned into a faint yet vivid fear of an impending disaster. Fearing legal troubles and the destruction of my family's reputation at the filthy hands of this treacherous driver, I decided to leave the dark villa immediately, where every corner now reeked of betrayal. But before stepping out of the intricately carved wooden door, I quietly used my phone to activate the entire hidden surveillance system in the house. My father was an extremely cautious man, even somewhat paranoid. Like a veteran tycoon in the business world, he maintained an unalterable habit. Every property owned by our family had to be fitted with an entirely independent, absolutely secure surveillance system. These were micro-hidden cameras with ultra-high resolution, equipped with infrared night vision and strategically placed in flawless blind spots, ensuring 0 dead angles in the entire living space. Every gesture, every deceitful word of those 3 people would henceforth be captured in full under the cold lens of technology, awaiting the day they would be exposed to the light. The tense atmosphere of the battle for glory began shifting to a new battleground. The final audition round to find the most deserving face for the female lead of a blockbuster movie project was held right at the Royal Convention Center of a five-star luxury hotel, one of the symbols of prosperity directly owned by my family. When I received the notification that I would be auditioning right in the luxurious sanctuary built by my own family, I could only smile bitterly at the irony of fate. Knowing that his beloved daughter was participating in such an important event, my father personally graced the event with his presence, appearing with the majestic aura of an emperor at the helm of a tycoon empire. I stood waiting in the vast grand lobby where gigantic crystal chandeliers cast a splendid golden light that reflected off marble walls so polished they functioned as mirrors. As soon as the familiar, powerful figure of my father appeared at the doorway, I immediately hurried over, casting aside all usual pride to throw myself tightly into his arms. Seeking a peaceful anchor amidst the storm of lies surrounding me, the warm scene of father and daughter was undoubtedly a fatal blow to the psyche of the criminal standing beside him. Uncle Ma stood next to my father, his face pale as ash, drained of blood. He was fidgeting uncontrollably, his hands clasped together and trembling, sweat clinging to his wrinkled forehead. His eyes looked at me with intense tension, fear, and pleading, as if he were standing in the dock awaiting a death sentence. Just as the suffocating atmosphere stretched taut like a wire, Lam Nhu made her appearance. She wore a gorgeous evening gown and heavy makeup, but her face was filled with the arrogant, overbearing air of someone who had just stepped into high society using dirty money. Seeing my father and me embracing affectionately, her eyes widened in shock mixed with anger. She walked over quickly, her sharp voice cutting through the luxurious space. "Dad, why are you with her?" The sudden appearance of his fake daughter acted like a spark, igniting the ultimate terror in Uncle Ma's heart. Terrified that the harsh truth would be exposed right in public, Uncle Ma rushed forward, grabbing Lam Nhu's wrist tightly and pulling her far away from us as if fleeing a deadly plague. The distance prevented me from hearing the hurried, deceitful whispers he blurted out to her to cover up the situation. I only saw that after a round of shaky explanations from Uncle Ma, Lam Nhu turned back to look at me. Her lips curled into a disdainful smirk, her eyes now filled with a deep, ridiculous sense of pity for me. The battle for glory wasn't limited to just the two of us. Aside from Lam Nhu and me competing fiercely for the single female lead role, the film crew also had to select and decide on dozens of other major and minor roles for the movie. Thus, the hotel waiting lounge was packed with delicate faces. All actors had to wait patiently, going through nerve-wracking rounds of evaluation, since we were both registered to audition for the same main character. The organizers inadvertently arranged for Lam Nhu and me to sit next to each other on a luxurious leather sofa in the corner of the waiting room. Having barely sat down before the seat could even warm up, Lam Nhu turned to me, casting a sharp glare and speaking sarcastically. "Tran Tin Phi, stop pretending to be so noble in front of me, it's exhausting. Today my dad told me the whole truth back in the main lobby. Turns out you're just the daughter of the lowly driver who works for my family." Facing her delusionally insulting words, I showed no sign of anger or embarrassment. I merely looked her straight in the eyes, raised an eyebrow, and asked back in the most nonchalant tone possible, "So what if I'm a driver's daughter? Does being a driver's daughter automatically make someone a tier lower than others?" Lam Nhu burst into laughter, an arrogant and contemptuous laugh. She answered instantly as if it were an self-evident truth of life, "Of course. Being a driver is inherently a lowly job, spending an entire lifetime bowing down, driving, and serving others. You happen to be the daughter of a dirt-poor driver, so you are basically the lowest of the low in this class-divided society." Hearing this, I couldn't hold it back any longer and burst out laughing. My laughter rang out brightly in the suffocating waiting room, carrying ultimate irony for her utter stupidity. I really didn't know, nor could I imagine, the day she discovers that she and her mother are actually the lowest of the low when all the splendor and luxury she was enjoying was nothing more than a cheap scam by a real driver. What kind of terrifying feeling she would have then. I began to feel extremely curious and eagerly awaited the moment that karma would strike her head. My laughter was like a bucket of cold water dumped straight onto Lam Nhu's sky-high self-esteem. She gritted her teeth, her eyes rolling up in fury as she glared at me as if wanting to devour me alive. "How dare you use that insolent attitude to speak to the young lady of the house? Fine. Just you wait. I'll tell my dad right away to fire your useless driver father so your whole family can end up begging on the streets." My dad also said the only reason a nobody without backing like you could squeeze onto the shortlist for the female lead is because your dad is critically ill and about to die. Out of pity for his years of dedicated service as a loyal driver for our family, my dad took mercy, wanting to help him fulfill his last wish before closing his eyes for good by letting you into this audition list. But you better remember this clearly. That's just putting you on the list as a formality to comfort a dying man. As for touching the prestigious female lead role, you're just a toad dreaming of swan meat, daydreaming in broad daylight. Saying this, she arrogantly raised her chin, her heavily made-up face displaying the ultimate triumph of someone holding the power of life and death in her hands. She rambled on in a smug voice. "This blockbuster film Princess of Nam Than is entirely funded and produced by the renowned Thien Kim Film Group. My dad happens to be the general manager who holds full decision-making authority for the group. With just a short phone call from him, your name, Tran Tin Phi, will be erased without mercy from this project in a split second." I sat in silence, listening as a feeling of ultimate disgust welled up inside me. I knew I was in a bizarre situation, but even in my wildest dreams, I could never have imagined that Uncle Ma, a driver who used to seem so gentle and honest to my family, could be so vile and vicious as to fabricate cruel curses about my father's death just to build up his own deceitful, wealthy facade. The treachery of the human heart was truly a bottomless abyss. I turned to look directly at Lam Nhu's joyful face, a half-smile curling on my lips, my gaze as cold as ice. Nothing about the future is set in stone. Lam Nhu, you should remember that you aren't his biological daughter. Now that he has legally married your mother, everything a man like him wanted is firmly in his grasp. With his power so great right now, that glamorous general manager position will surely attract countless young, beautiful women who will willingly throw themselves into his arms. When that time comes, will you two, mother and daughter, even be able to hold onto the titles of wife and heiress? I intentionally paused, watching her expression begin to twist, then dealt a fatal blow. Lam Nhu, trading your body for fame is a trick you've probably mastered to absolute perfection by now. Haven't you? Don't think no one knows that from the very first round of resume screening, you willingly climbed into the vice director's bed just to secure a ticket in here. Don't assume the filthy things you do behind closed doors remain completely hidden. Before standing up to leave, I leaned close to her ear, dropping a subtle yet razor-sharp remark. "If you can do such dirty things to get what you want, what makes you think others wouldn't do the same?" Those words were like a bucket of cold water dumped over Lam Nhu's head, turning her heavily makeup-plastered face instant pale, drained of all color, leaving her staring blankly as I walked away in pure, bitter resentment. After the tense and dramatic final audition round concluded, I walked back to my father's private VIP room on the top floor of the hotel to report on the situation. However, the moment I pushed open the heavy oak door, I never expected Uncle Ma to be inside as well. The scene inside made me frown in surprise. Seeing me appear, Uncle Ma reacted like a startled wild beast, extreme panic written all over his face. Instantly sensing something amiss, I quickly closed the door and turned back out into the hallway to avoid an awkward situation. I had only taken a few steps when hurried footsteps caught up from behind. Uncle Ma frantically chased after me into the quiet hallway. For some murky reason, he was completely shirtless on top, revealing a sweat-covered face and an extremely messy, disheveled appearance. Uncle Ma looked around the empty corridor nervously, then lowered his voice to ask me in a cautious tone filled with fear and deference, "Young lady, please tell me the truth. You haven't said anything about my business to the old man. I mean to the chairman, have you?" I crossed my arms over my chest, looking at the middle-aged man trembling in front of me with cold contempt. Uncle Ma put a shirt on properly before speaking to me. Hearing my words, his face instantly flushed red with shame. He frantically waved his hands, explaining with deep regret and sincerity, "Young lady, please don't misunderstand me. Just now, the water pipe in the chairman's bathroom suddenly burst, leaking water everywhere. Seeing that, I went in to help repair it for a moment. My clothes got soaked, so I took off my shirt, and then in my rush, I forgot to put it back on." With that, Uncle Ma rushed back into the room to grab a dress shirt and put it on. When he stepped back into the hallway, the arrogant demeanor of the self-proclaimed general manager he put on in front of Lam NHU had vanished entirely. Replaced by the pathetic state of a guilty offender, he lowered his voice to the absolute minimum, practically whispering in desperate plea, "Young lady, I beg you, please have mercy and don't drag my impersonation out into the light, now that the woman and I have completed the marriage registration process. Just give me a little more time. I will definitely find a suitable opportunity to confess all these lies to them, then immediately stop and go back to being a dutiful driver. For the sake of my many years as a driver for the Tran family, please let this go." I stood facing the middle-aged man who had always seemed honest but whose face was now deeply etched with wrinkles of fear and bottomless greed. The dim, yellowish light of the hotel hallway cast down, stretching our shadows jaggedly across the thick wool carpet beneath our feet. The tense silence was stretched taut like a wire, waiting to snap right before an impending storm. I pretended not to understand, softly shrugging and raising my eyebrows with the most innocent, pure expression to handle his probing. "Uncle Ma, I really don't know what you're talking about. My dad is still waiting for me inside that room. You know how my dad is, he hates nothing more than tardiness and messiness." I intentionally paused, glancing around the hallway where tall men in black suits wearing earpieces, my father's elite security detail, stood on strict guard at every turn. "There are my father's security guards all over the hotel. Whatever you have to say, take your time and say it later." My soft words, loaded with 1,000 pounds of weight, pierced straight into Uncle Ma's ultimate fear like sharp needles. His whole body trembled violently, cold sweat pouring from his forehead and running down his pale cheeks. Uncle Ma didn't dare do anything further, nor did he dare take any reckless action under the strict supervision of the nearby professional bodyguards. He could only bow his head low, shoulders slumping in resignation, and sulkily turn his back, leaving disheartened like a defeated soldier fleeing the battlefield. I watched his thin back disappear around the hallway bend, the corners of my lips curling into a mocking curve. As I walked into the room, I deliberately moved very slowly, my sharp eyes catching sight of a figure hiding in the dark corner of the corridor taking sneaky photos. The faint glow from the phone screen reflected on that person's face, revealing a smirk of twisted, smug satisfaction. "Huh, Lam NHU, as expected, you think everyone is just like you, ready to sell themselves out, trading their dignity and body just for a chance to step up high and touch the fake luxury life you've always dreamed of. You think you've caught me by the throat. But you have no idea that you are the one digging your own grave through arrogance and stupidity." To celebrate the conclusion of the rigorous casting process for the Thien Kim Film Group's blockbuster movie project, the Academy organized a grand and magnificent announcement ceremony. That day, the entire campus seemed to shake with an unprecedentedly lively and festive atmosphere. From early morning, bright red banners were hung everywhere. Teachers and students gathered in crowds, packing the main hall with noisy chatter and laughter, creating a medley of sounds filled with anticipation and hidden calculations. Word had it that the chairman of Thien Kim Film Group would also attend today's ceremony. However, rumor had it that this chairman was extremely low profile, mysterious in his movements, hated media noise, and had declined to speak in public. He chose to step back behind the scenes, yielding the stage to the group's chief executive general manager to manage and announce the results. Lam, NHU, and I sat right in the middle of the front row, the prime spot reserved for the two top contenders for this heavy role, silently listening to the surrounding chatter from classmates and teachers. A tense atmosphere enveloped us like an inescapable glass cage. She leaned close to me, the thick smell of her cheap perfume striking my nose and making me frown. She lowered her voice, warning me with a defiant, malicious look. "Just you wait and see." Lam, NHU tilted her chin, her eyes filled with contempt and overconfidence as she looked at me and continued. "Tran Tin Phi, the female lead role, is definitely mine. My dad said he looked at the list yesterday. You don't stand a chance against me." Hearing that, I almost burst out laughing right on the spot. I had to try my best to maintain a composed face before her absurd delusion. The list Uncle Ma saw yesterday was probably a dismissal list, not a role assignment list. In reality, I had told my father everything about Uncle Ma days ago, without missing a single detail. Over the past few days, my father had been quietly gathering evidence regarding his wrongdoings, embezzlement, and abuse of power within the group. Yesterday, all solid documents and evidence were handed over to law enforcement for handling. The only reason Uncle Ma could still appear as usual today, casually driving his daughter to school, was that my father didn't want to startle the snake before the announcement ceremony concluded successfully. Thinking of this, I looked at Lam, NHU with deep pity. Poor puppet, dancing on a string while thinking she was the one controlling the game. I thought to myself, fine, let's see how you act out the rest of this play. Suddenly, solemn, fast-paced entrance music rang out, cutting through all the noise under the auditorium. The hall lights dimmed, leaving only bright spotlight beams sweeping back and forth across the main stage. The host's voice boomed through the high-powered speaker system. "Next, we invite the final two candidates for the female lead of Princess of Nam Than to step onto the stage." Lam, NHU, and I stepped together to the center of the large stage under thousands of focused eyes. Behind us was a massive screen sparkling with light. Below was a dense sea of people consisting of the Academy's entire faculty and student body holding their breath in anticipation. The vast space suddenly fell dead silent. Everyone holding their breath for this decisive moment. This was the female lead chosen personally by the famous director Tuong Mu, a dream for countless acting students. A once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to reach the pinnacle of glory in a single step. My heart pounded continuously in my chest. Despite having prepared mentally, standing before this decisive moment, I couldn't help feeling nervous. In complete contrast to me, Lam, NHU seemed entirely confident of victory, a bright, proud smile resting on her lips that challenged everyone around her. I knew it wasn't that her psychological resilience was great or her stage composure was solid. It was simply because she believed she had a father who was the powerful general manager of Thien Kim Film Group backing her up. Little did she know that soon enough she would learn that her father actually worked the very job she despised most, a driver, and she would become the exact type of person she herself had called the lowest of the low. The daughter of a poor driver. Amidst that suffocatingly tense atmosphere, the host slowly opened the luxurious gold-trimmed red envelope in his hand. Clearing his throat, he announced loudly, "I hereby declare that the female lead of Princess of Nam Than is Tran Tin Phi." Instantly, the large screen broadcasted my personal profile featuring strikingly impressive images. Tran Tin Phi, top-ranking student in the acting department of the prestigious Beijing Film Academy. Throughout her studies, she has accumulated rich practical experience by acting in over 30 music videos for famous singers and over 10 independent films, winning artistic awards. Her latest work, titled Yin Rucheng AI, will premiere this coming October. In this film, Tran Tin Phi was the only professional actor involved in the project. Everyone else was local, mud-clothed farmers. The warm, deep voiceover of the intro video continued echoing across the hall. To properly portray her role in a film about high-altitude poverty alleviation, Tran Tin Phi truly lived and stayed in a poor rural village for half a year alongside the local people. Her professional dedication and expert qualities were highly praised by the film's director. The casting team of Princess of Nam Than believes that enduring hardship is a fundamental quality an actor must possess. Acting is not child's play. Only when one respects the profession can one truly excel as a genuine actor. Applause erupted like thunder against the four walls of the large auditorium, deafening cheers shaking the entire space. Lam Nhu standing beside me froze completely, her face drained of all blood, her eyes wide with horror, unable to believe her ears. Realizing she had missed out on her dream female lead role, the jealousy and madness in her heart instantly erupted like a volcano. Losing all reason, she cast aside all daily fake elegance and suddenly shoved the host standing in front of the microphone. Lam Nhu snatched the microphone, screaming in a screeching voice ragged with resentment that echoed across the whole auditorium. Tran Tin Phi has no right to be the female lead. She used dirty tricks to steal this role. Last night, I saw with my own eyes that she seduced my dad in the hotel. My dad is the general manager of Thien Kim Film Group. I have proof. She immediately winked at the backstage technical department with a smug, malicious expression. Instantly, the giant LED screen spanning hundreds of square meters in the center of the art sanctuary blacked out for a second. Then lit up, displaying a series of high-definition photos of Uncle Ma and me. As the photos played continuously in slow motion, each frame felt like a slow-motion reel stripping away a distorted reality, turning the whole matter into a completely different story through the malicious lens of the person who set it up. In the photos, the setting was the luxurious red-carpeted hallway of the presidential suite in a lavish 6-star hotel. My front foot had just stepped out of the presidential suite with a calm face, while right behind me, Uncle Ma was shirtless on top, looking panicked and frantic as he chased after me. The two of us were even pulling at each other right in the quiet hallway. Due to camera angles carefully calculated in advance by a professional, Uncle Ma looked like he was tightly holding me in his arms, an extremely suspicious and sensitive pose. Beneath the stage, the atmosphere instantly descended into chaos. Flashlights from journalists' cameras began flashing continuously like lightning tearing through the auditorium. A few minor producers and directors who had previously bribed Uncle Ma hoping for sponsorship leaped from their seats, their faces red with anger and panic. Pointing up at the screen, they yelled as if to prove their own innocence, "Isn't that the general manager of Thien Kim Film Group? This female student truly has no shame, barely out of her shell and already daring to seduce an older man to trade for a major role. Is the casting process for Princess of Nam Than this dark? Just a freshman and already using these filthy tricks to advance herself. Truly shameless and vile, the school should expel her immediately to clean up the academic environment." In the blink of an eye, a wave of rage surged fiercely. Curses, insults, and the harshest abuse flooded the massive hall, crashing into my ears like rising tidal waves. Amidst that storm of filthy public opinion, I still stood firm like an ice statue, devoid of emotion, my cold eyes looking straight at Lam Nhu, who was trembling with extreme excitement. Step by step, slowly and unhurriedly, I walked up to the microphone set in the center of the stage. The rhythmic click of my high heels against the wooden floor beat a rhythm into the silence that gradually settled as everyone awaited my response. Leaning close to the mic, I spoke in a calm voice that carried overwhelming authority. "Lam Nhu, didn't your dad tell you that he's just my driver?" My voice was firm, echoing through every corner of the large auditorium via the high-powered speaker system, every word terrifyingly clear and distinct. The entire auditorium suddenly fell as quiet as a sheet, a suffocating silence settling over the room. I glanced down to signal my people under the stage. The slanderous photos on the large screen were immediately crossed out with a decisive, bright red X. Right after, a high-quality video with vivid surround sound appeared on the big screen. The video began to play. In crisp resolution, Uncle Ma was shirtless on top, his face dripping with sweat as he frantically chased after me along the hotel hallway. His panicked voice echoed loud and clear through the hall's audio system. "Young lady, the water pipe in the room broke. I just finished repairing it, so I forgot to put my shirt on. Young lady, for the sake of my over 10 years of service as a driver for the Tran family, please don't tell the master about me impersonating the general manager of Thien Kim Film Group. I've already gotten the woman. And we've registered our marriage too. Just wait a little longer and I'll confess to Lam Nhu and her mother." In that authentic video, I merely turned my head coldly, gave a brief, decisive reply, and walked away. My father is still waiting. I have to go back to the room. The situation inverted completely in a single split second. The entire auditorium was like a timed bomb that had just been detonated, exploding into astonished whispers, with all eyes now fixing on Lam Nhu, whose face was now deathly pale, completely drained of blood. What, Dad Ma, whom Lam Nhu was always bragging about everywhere, turned out to be just a lowly driver. Goodness, so the Rolls-Royce Phantom she often rode in was actually Tran Tin Phai's family car. Lam Nhu is actually just the daughter of her family's driver. This truth is way too shocking. An elderly producer sitting in the front row exploded in a fit of rage, his face twisting in humiliation. He slammed his hand on the table and stood up abruptly, roaring. "Unbelievable. A big-shot producer like me was actually fooled by a lowly driver out of more than 700,000 yuan. I was even stupid enough to treat this driver's daughter like a real-life princess, waiting on her hand and foot every single day with the finest food and luxury. Where is that guy named Ma? I have to settle the score with him. That damned scammer, drag him out here and make him return my money immediately." Furious anger erupted like gasoline poured onto a fire. As it turned out, Lam Nhu and her dad Ma had used his fake title to swindle an endless amount of money and goodwill from numerous people in the entertainment industry. Seeing the enraged crowd gradually lose control and surge toward the stage to tear Lam Nhu apart, the sharp, urgent blare of police sirens suddenly echoed from outside the building. The massive doors of the auditorium were pushed wide open. Uniformed police officers moved inside swiftly, restraining driver Ma, who was cowering in a corner of the hall. The reason for his arrest was read aloud by the investigating officer before the entire public: suspected fraud and embezzlement of an exceptionally large amount of property. Lam Nhu, standing on the stage, was also escorted away by the police on the spot, accused of a series of severe charges including defamation, slander, and illegal entry into a private residence to steal confidential materials and information. Her money-grubbing mother, an accomplice in all their schemes, couldn't escape the net of the law either. The family of three followed one another into prison, paying a heavy price for their bottomless greed and insane delusions. Throughout this entire media frenzy, I never once allowed my father, who had always been low profile and cherished a simple life, to appear before the public or the press even a single time. I relied entirely on my stellar acting ability, passing every rigorous casting round to rightfully win the female lead role in the most convincing manner, proudly becoming a new generation Moo girl. On the night of the Mid-Autumn Festival that year, a quiet and warm atmosphere enveloped us. Our family of three sat on the spacious, greenery-shaded rooftop terrace of our classic suburban villa, enjoying cups of fragrant tea while gazing at the round, flawless moon suspended in the deep night sky. My father was moved, his eyes sparkling with boundless pride as he took my small hand and squeezed it tightly. My precious daughter has truly grown up. I believe in you. In the future, you will surely become an outstanding actress, shining brilliantly with your own light. Your mother and I will forever be your strongest support and your most peaceful harbor." I looked deep into my father's eyes, then turned to my mother's gentle smile. The soft, clear golden moonlight cascaded like water over the glowing faces of the people I loved most in this world. I smiled brightly, an endless source of inner strength surging in my heart. In the future, I will definitely become the best actress. I will never stop striving, and I will forever believe in myself.